But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with money.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 326. Who would do this and why? Good questions, especially since I didn't tell you what this was. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. How can I stumble over Annihilator and then get the personification of perceptivity right? Like, what the fuck is wrong with my mouth?
Only you, Hannah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about some weird shit tonight. This is almost like gonna be a cross between the Twilight Zone and Alex Jones tonight. Because like I've been looking at this, I've been looking at what people have been talking about, and I've been looking at what actually has been reported and everything, and I have thoughts with a U and GHT. Like I've been dealing with the other kind of thoughts on Twitter too, but you know they're like flies. that you just swat with a tennis racket that's electrified so that they pop. We have one of those. It's really cool. But in any case, so what we're gonna discuss tonight is, and I'm gonna preface this with everybody knows that I'm gonna vote for Trump, right? And everybody knows that I'm gonna vote for Trump partly because I support some of his policies, partly because I really like who he picked for a running mate, but mostly because Kamala Harris is fucking nuts. And she is a cop, a prosecutor who has taken direct action against men's due process rights. And I cannot in good conscience, abandon a candidate that opposes a candidate that is all about violating men's due process rights. So there you go. It isn't what the subject is about, but you know that may be my bias. But tonight I don't really want to talk about who's the better candidate, why I like this candidate, why other people like the other candidate, and all that. What I want to talk about is this tendency in our government to exploit men with vulnerabilities caused by mental health conditions, intellectual disability, social isolation, and other life circumstances as cannon fodder and patsies when there is political propaganda to be had and political maneuvering to be done and war to be made and money to be made. And it doesn't matter which candidate is which. If somebody tried to do this to Kamala Harris and the dots connected to the state, I'd be talking about this, because ultimately it's not the person who is targeted for assassination that's important in this instance. It's the men who are targeted for lack of a better term, because most of the time it comes out that there's one of those vulnerability conditions. The men who are targeted for grooming and exploitation as cannon fodder and as fall guys. And that's an important thing for us to talk about, because this is something that is an historical phenomenon in times of war, in times of Cold War, in times of trying to overthrow a government, any type of action like this. There is always at least one man being targeted for exploitation by the people whose goal he's being pushed to further. And I'm not saying necessarily that Routh specifically was exploited, but this is given his recent actions, it gets a possibility. So, in any case, before we get into all of what I'm going to show you and what we're going to talk about tonight, and some of it's going to be video, and I'll try not to interrupt it too much, but we're going to interrupt just to talk about it in several points. Before we get into that, as always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justatip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the Thought Police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So that microphone noise is happening again. I want to make sure it's not mine doing it. I can't see in the live stream where it is. Oh, nope, Mike, it's yours. Your mic cord is loose. darn thing.
Shake it about a bit.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. I think
Very
if it's older, you might have to tape it in place. It's doing it again. Oh my god. We might have to just deal with that this show.
I'll just mute.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's. I've had electronics doing that too, and I've got a lot of stuff that I use that either has duct tape or electrical tape on it. So all it takes is like the little copper wires inside on those are so thin. You could crochet jewelry out of them if you wanted to, and but they do break eventually over time just because of the load being, they expand and contract and so on, and so you end up in a situation where you get this little tiny break, and then every time the cord moves just a little bit, the connection breaks and it makes that humming noise. It's a pain in the ass. That's what happens when you plug your cord in the wrong way. No. But anyway, so here we go. The first thing that I probably should talk about, I do want to play this video, but the first thing I should probably talk about is actually not the video. I was going to make it first, and I'm going to switch tabs here as soon as I find the one I am looking for. Did I not? Open this. Here it is. Okay, so CNN published this and Fox News published this. I have a Fox News article up, but CNN published it first. But I don't want to give them any views. I'm not totally happy with Fox News either, but I don't mind giving them views. Like, I like how this guy got a middle name. Like, all of a sudden, I know everybody has a middle name, but his middle name suddenly became important because he tried to assassinate the presidential candidate. But, so he wrote this letter. Let's see if they published the letter.
Was there another Ryan Routh out there protesting? It wasn't me!
No. Okay, so the Justice Department actually released this letter. Right? And this is the thing that is important from this story. The Justice Department released a chilling letter written by would-be Trump assassination Ryan Wesley Routh on Monday. The DOJ obtained the letter from a witness who said they received it inside a box delivered to them by Routh several months prior to the assassination attempt. So he wrote it a long time ago. Authorities say the witness opened the box only after hearing Routh was suspected in the attack. The box contained several handwritten letters as well as ammunition, among other things. One of the letters addressed Dear World admitted to an assassination attempt on Trump. He also offered money to anyone willing to finish the job. CNN actually published a picture of the letter. I don't know if the Justice Department link here... I don't know if that doesn't go to the Justice Department link. But CNN did publish a picture of that letter. And it may be in this video here. He offered a bounty of $150,000 in the midst of a recession in a country where the person that he's targeting has been demonized as a threat, not just a bad candidate, not just somebody that, we don't want to see this guy get elected. We like the other person's policies better, or his policies are terrible. None of that. It's threat to our democracy, threat to the very lives of several groups of people with mental health vulnerabilities, accused of being a womanizer, accused of being a violent criminal toward women. They've leveled all these horrible accusations against Trump, and they've convinced a lot of people to physically be afraid of him. And now they're admitting publicly that this guy posted this bounty, right? Keep in mind that previously there has been at least one mass shooter whose manifesto was not released because the news media feared that it would inspire people to engage in violence just because of what it said in the manifesto. But they released one where it's offering a bounty in the circumstance where many people in the country have been targeted for radicalization against a particular candidate. Like, that's terrifying in and of itself.
It's crazy. It's like, they hate Trump so bad. They want something to happen to him. They're going to will it into existence, and they don't even have to do that because they've got their fucking plans. This is not, if anybody doesn't think that the CIA is involved here, I got news for you.
Yeah.
It's just too stupid to be stupid.
Yeah.
How do you let this happen? How do we let this happen and take this country, our secret service, how do we take them seriously? They can't protect the fucking president. What the hell makes you think they're going to protect you?
Well, and as we listen to this video upcoming, I want anybody who has traveled across international borders and had to deal with all of the checking and interrogation and all of the variety of things that you have to do with customs and border patrol and so on in between borders that are international, especially if you're going to or from the United States, anywhere. And think about, if you were going to try to do what Routh was doing in Ukraine, what methods would you try to use? And if you tried to do what Routh did, would the government let you? So just take a listen here. This isn't a show that I usually listen to, but it's interesting. This is Mike Benz, and I've actually followed this guy because of this episode, because he seems to be very intent on getting out information and discussing solid information about this situation. So he might be a source. He might be a good source of information on future news items, and I'm always looking for that because there's a lot of the mainstream media. Everybody has an angle, and it's better to look at a whole bunch of different sources and figure out, whether they're reporting on it from an angle or whether they're reporting on all the information. And a lot of times you will get information from a variety of sources that each of the other sources are lacking. They'll all focus on what fits their narrative. So with that, let's take a look at this.
How a gunman could get so close to President Trump. That gunman had very strange connections, very strange relations. And there's only one man who is the proper person to peel back those dark curtains and show us what's really happening. That man is Mike Benz, and he joins us now.
Make sure I'm not. Yeah.
Mike, thank you. I'm delighted to have you on the program. We have probably an hour before President Trump speaks, maybe less, but I want to just begin by saying every alarm bell that you have coached me in, and you've done it often live in front of tens or hundreds of thousands of people, so you've been coaching all of us, every alarm bell is ringing right now. This guy was a NATO sycophant. He was recruiting soldiers. He was working with Iran, working with Afghanistan. He had clearly had his brain broken. He followed CIA operators and handlers on social media who are representatives of every cutout organization you've ever talked about on this program. And I don't want to jump to any conclusions here, but I'm saying that the burden of proof, I guess, is going to now be with the government to tell us, no, this guy wasn't part of something much, much deeper and darker.
Well, I mean, exactly what you just said. It lights up in the brain a veritable pinball machine of blob connections. It's almost overwhelming. I mean, the fact is This is a guy we're told was an unemployed construction worker, jet setting around the world for years to every CIA hot zone on the planet. I've been making the joke that he is the Forrest Gump of CIA paramilitary activity, not just because of, the sort of mentally challenged aspect of Forrest Gump, but because he serendipitously just happened to be at the right place at the right time when the CIA plumbers broke into Watergate and when all these various historical things happened. And the fact is what Routh was doing implicates the CIA activity, or it's tangential to the CIA activity in Pakistan, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in North Korea, in Haiti. You almost can't spin the globe and find a CIA hot zone where Ryan Routh was not actively recruiting paramilitary muscle for the CIA DoD work there. And then you add the very strange protection.
All right, I'm going to pause this a little bit. It's probably going to jump up to a larger size here, but
for years. This is a.
It seems like it's getting. I hope it's not too loud for people. It seems to be getting into the red zone on the sound there. But what he's talking about here is kind of interesting because I don't know anybody in anybody in any political group that I've been involved with that hits the mark that many times, going places, doing things, getting involved with things, being associated with things, and then it comes back later and it's like, oh yeah, the CIA was doing that. Oh yeah, the FBI was doing that. Oh yeah, that was a CIA gig. That was an FBI gig. It's really strange that this guy, what he's talking about here, this guy is. Okay, so Flying Falcon says the volume was good. I'm going to turn it back up then because I don't want it to be too quiet either.
The guy who has 74 arrests on his record, but never spent a day in jail. And I gave this.
So here's another thing. That key factor right there. 74 arrests on his record. So I don't know if everybody remembers our hearing at the Calgary Expo, right? But when we entered the country to go to testify, I and another guy, and a guy that was gonna testify on our behalf, like we both got pulled aside by Canadian Border Patrol, and they questioned me because I was sitting and talking to him. That's it. That's the only concern they had. But they kept me for a few hours to ask me questions about my knowledge of him and his history. He had an arrest from like 20 years ago. And they wouldn't let him enter the country because of it. And it was basically that he had gotten, as a over 18 teenager, he'd gotten caught up in something stupid that he admitted was stupid, that should never have happened, that he shouldn't have ever been involved in, and that he had grown past. He was an adult, there's no reason to treat him as a suspect, as far as behavior was concerned anymore. He had years of upstanding citizenship, and they still wouldn't let him travel. Still wouldn't let him enter the country. And I can see some countries being lenient in regard to old arrests, or one arrest, or 2 or 3 arrests. If you're entering a country to do a job in that country, and maybe you've made arrangements for them to accept, this is stuff you did a long time ago, but it's okay now. But it is very hard to travel internationally with a bunch of arrests on your record. And somehow, despite that many arrests, Ryan Routh did. He not only traveled internationally, like the United States doesn't even always let people leave the country if they got that much going on. He not only left the United States, but he went into another country with all of that in his history. That's remarkable by itself. How was he able to do that?
He got by with a little help from his friends.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to point out, let's see, we are at 2:40, so I'm going to back up a little bit, and we'll get there again. What I'm looking for is, you look at the expressions on this guy's face. I don't know. It's hard to judge because some people just have that kind of face. All right, but where's the smile? Okay.
For some reason, I imagined him to be a younger gentleman.
Yeah.
Gentleman. Calling him a gentleman. What is wrong with me?
No, he's a Gen Xer. He's middle aged. But the thing that bugs me about this is, like, either he's distressed in this picture, even though he's trying to look like he's smiling, or he's got some sort of mental thing going on. And the reason I say that is because I don't know if you've ever watched God, I can't think of the name of it's a Steve Martin movie. It's the one where he and shoot, I can't think of the other actor. They're playing con artists, and trying to con this one old lady.
30 Rotten Scoundrels?
30 Rotten Scoundrels, thank you. Steve Martin's character pretends to be intellectually disabled.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that, like, this kind of grimacing smile.
Yeah.
And that does happen in people with conditions that makes it difficult for their brain to control their muscles, or they just don't understand how to make facial expressions. The facial expressions are somewhat subconscious, but they're also conscious. And you'll see, like, a lot of times kids with ADHD or bipolar disorder, something, you don't, like, it's not diagnosed yet a lot of times in kids, but any kind of little disorder like that, when you ask them to smile for a picture, this is what you get.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, by the time someone's an adult, they're able to smile for a picture and not look like they're expecting you to shoot them with a gun instead of a camera. And yeah, Michael Caine was the other guy, not Martin Short. But yeah, it just, when I saw this picture, it bugged me, because that's not a happy smile. It's like that meme of the guy, you know, that goes around with the taxes and the inflation numbers and all that. That I think it was originally an ad for some dental place or Medicare, but the fake smile guy, I can't think of what it's actually called.
That older balding guy?
Yeah. And he just looks like, you know, he's smiling at gunpoint.
Yes.
And this was his social media post. So I don't think he was smiling at gunpoint here. I think he just has difficulty, like, his expressions. And it's hard to analyze this because some people just have a hard time being photographed.
Mm-hmm.
But this blank expression, like, there's either a mental illness or a lack of intelligence behind this. Like, he might actually be relatable to Forrest Gump in more ways than one.
Mm.
So when I was looking at this and when I was listening to this, I'm thinking, all right, so there's two possibilities with this guy, right? One of them is he is full-on CIA asset and he's very crafty and all of this is just an act and blah, blah. The other possibility is that there is something compromised in this man's brain. Like I said, mental health, intellectual disability, social isolation, lack of understanding of other people, anything like that has allowed handlers to exploit him as a patsy. These two things are not mutually exclusive. He could be somebody who wanted to be involved in this stuff, who saw the media propaganda surrounding this and got caught up in it and was like, oh, this is very important, I want to get involved in this and everything, and then the CIA looked at him and was like, oh god, this guy's an idiot, we can use him. That's a distinct possibility, but it's hard to tell what's indicated here, because like, you can't just judge by photographs. Like I said, some people just have a really rough time being photographed. I'm not comfortable on that side of the camera myself. I like the other side of the camera. But going on with this, we'll get back to 240 here. We're close to 240. That's close. Where's my
arrests
sound? There we go.
on his record, but never spent a day in jail. And I gave this to your producers if they want to pull up slide number 3, please, which is the Daily Mail article. And let me know if you need the link to that. You can just Google the article name just from the image. But
failed Trump assassin racked up extensive rap sheet, felonies, petty crimes, never spent a day in prison.
Right. Yeah. This.
And the weird thing is, when you look at this, some of the things that are on that list, those are not charges that just get dropped. Just pointing that out. Gabriel Phelan Lucas, you are being very nice. I have resting serial killer face. Especially like if I'm tired. But going on here.
Include larceny, brandishing a weapon of mass destruction, a machine gun, a hit and run in his car, 74 times, but never spent a day in jail.
Like, here's the reason that I wanted to play this and get people to understand. Women accuse guys of domestic violence and drop the charges, right? And women accuse guys of sexual violence and drop the charges. And police will actually take charges that are questionable from those instances where women drop the charges. Like, and there's a lot of instances where women don't drop the charges, but when they do file a complaint against a guy and then they drop the charge, there are times when the police are like, yeah, there's solid evidence here, we're going to pursue this because it's a serious crime. And it might even just be, like the case that was sort of connected to the 7 years in hell case, where the false accuser in that case accused her second husband of domestic violence for brushing up against her shoulder as he fled a room where she was throwing heavy object at him. And when she tried to drop those charges, the cops pursued them anyway, because just the minor act of bumping into a woman while you're trying to run away from her in the only direction, because she's blocking the only direction you can get out of the room. Like, that's serious enough the police would not drop it, even though the accuser wanted to drop it. So for somebody to be accused of brandishing a weapon of mass destruction, like, what the fuck did he have, by the way? Because they don't usually say that if you're just pointing a gun at somebody. And what did he have, and how did that get dropped? If he was seen with this, if he was charged with it, he was seen with it. And then you also have, several other gun charges. We are in an environment where prosecutors don't just drop gun charges against people, much less people who have a long rap sheet. And this is the other thing. If you have a rap sheet at all, and you get accused of a crime, you get charged because somebody filed a complaint, or police saw you do something, or something was on video, they're less likely to drop it the next time, and the next time, and the next time. It doesn't get into double digits like that very often unless there is something else going on, like you're an illegal immigrant, and they can't prosecute you, or there's some other kind of there's some kind of incentive to drop, that it's plea bargained out and you're agreeing to things, or you're able to prove that it's a consistent lie every time. And there's not any information coming out where this guy is like, hey, I've been falsely accused over 70 times, and this keeps happening to me, and my due process rights are being violated. There's no news story about that. It's just that he has this extensive rap sheet, and yet every charge against him keeps getting dropped. So again, very strange, and it's not, none of what I've seen is 100% individually 100% solid proof of government manipulation in this situation, but all of it is evidence of government manipulation, and all of it adds up to increase the likelihood that that is probably the answer in this case. And why would they manipulate around this guy to facilitate his ability to do what he was doing? And I'm talking outside of the Trump assassination attempt, before the Trump assassination attempt, because that's important too. Before we go on, I'm going to read. We got 2 super chats, and I don't want them to disappear before I read them. So Albert Nader Retro gave us $2 Canadian and said Canucks for Trump, and then later he gave us $5 Canadian and said, I'm not a smart man, but I know how to delete a president. Yeah, that's the other question. Like, this guy, there's every indication that this guy is a giant dipshit. How the hell did he get that close to the president in the first place? How are dipshits getting close to a former president who is campaigning for another term?
I want to know who's losing their job. I mean, seriously, who's losing their job?
Yeah.
How do you let that happen? Somebody needs to be fired. It won't happen.
Somebody needs to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Like, this is very serious. And I will break away from that for a second. Let's see. It is right here. So this is also Fox News. And again, we know that they have a pro-Trump bias. But the thing that I'm concerned about here isn't Trump. Like, the story is about an assassination attempt on Trump. But what I want to talk about isn't Ryan Routh's poor man's surveillance enough to scout and out spot to target Trump expert. This is bizarre. Okay. Poor man's surveillance. He waited about 12 hours outside the golf club before his arrest. So he was in that vicinity all that time, and nobody in charge of security, in charge of the safety of the candidate, went past that area or went over to that area and saw him. There's no patrol. There was no double checking the general area to make sure that somebody who wasn't supposed to be there wasn't there. And that's bizarre. So Bill Stanton, former NYPD officer and executive protection expert, spoke with Fox News Digital on Tuesday regarding security failures surrounding the second attempt on Trump's life. And this is both of these times there were these big holes. Like, and my brother brought this up to me in a phone call the other day. How the hell did that kid know how to get into that festival ground? How to find exactly the one place that the Secret Service wasn't keeping track of, wasn't watching, and wouldn't see him until too late. Get up there without getting shot at or arrested. Set up to fire that shot. And then wait for the right time. All without being removed from there. How can something like that happen? Unless...
I've been saying this since before the first attempted, I say the first known attempted assassination. Right. I've been saying, they're going to kill him in prison, right? And that's where I've perhaps got it wrong so far. I thought they were going to put him in prison and then kill him. I even underestimated just how determined these people are. Who are these people, Mike? The fucking deep state, and don't pretend you don't know who the deep state is. But yeah, I've been saying this for a while, and some people have been like, well, why didn't they assassinate him in 2016 when he was running against Hillary? Well, because they were so confident that they didn't need to. They could just finagle Google and all these other sites into listening to is it Robert Epstein? I want to get the right Epstein name, but it's
Yeah.
I think it's Robert Epstein. This guy who's been looking into all of the nefarious shit that Google's been doing and all these other various internet sites have been doing, which is to say nothing of what TV channels have been doing, like NBC and ABC and MSNBC and CNN and all this stuff. That in 2016 they were so confident that they could rig all of these TV stations and all of these websites into swaying undecided voters, and yes, the amount of otherwise undecided voters that they could sway in this direction dwarfs any kind of election rigging that didn't happen. Don't worry, it didn't happen. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that it didn't happen, but I'm going to go ahead and say it didn't happen, knowing that y'all know it might have happened. It did happen. All right, I'm going to say it. Whatever nefariousness they swung in the 2020 election is nothing compared with the censorship and finagling that they did in all of these various avenues of information. And so they go, well, why didn't they assassinate him in 2016? Because they didn't think they needed to. But now it's 2024, and they've tried everything they can to sway all of these platforms in the direction of the Democrats, and now they're realizing that it's not working, despite how much rigging they can do in that direction. It's still not working because there's far too many American people who are like, I don't give a shit what Google tells me. I don't give a shit what CNN tells me. I just don't like paying $5 a gallon for fucking gas, and I can't afford to live anymore. And
$5 is generous.
Whatever it is,
depending on what state you're in, yeah.
I'm trying to translate to whatever the average is, but yeah, this is why they're trying to assassinate him now and not in 2016, because they have no other option left, like for all they can sway in the old school way, and I mean by old school I mean 2016, because that is the olden days at this point. That is so 2016, yeah. But yeah, this and all of this was because of some post I put on Twitter about the heart attack gun. You all have heard about the heart attack gun, right?
Oh God, that's old news. Old news.
Yeah, and some will say that's just a conspiracy theory, but no, this is as confirmed as it can be.
Yeah, it's confirmed. They
even
did
a bunch
invent a
of
heart attack.
normie channels have confirmed it. It's not confirmed that that's how Andrew Breitbart died, but there's still, a lot of people they think that's exactly how Andrew Breitbart died, and so it's not just bullets that he has to worry about. It's
right.
It's everything that the CIA can do, including this heart attack gun. So, it's and I pointed this out and I said, yeah, they're gonna kill him, possibly in prison, but they're gonna find some way of killing him. And they're all going, well, why wouldn't they have killed him in 2016? Well, that's why. And now they're trying to kill him in the old-fashioned way with a bullet and such. And at what point you kind of go, it's gone too far? And yeah, the answer is never. Yeah, like I said the other week, they could literally drop a nuke on Mar-a-Lago, and people will go, well, yeah, I suppose a few hundreds of thousands of people died, but it's necessary to save democracy.
Well, what's really disturbing here, honestly, in my book, it's not just disturbing that there are attempts on the life of a candidate that is supported by people in the United States. It's not people have made him out to be, almost but not quite literally Hitler. And if Hitler came back from the dead and ran for office in the United States, people probably wouldn't try to kill him because he would have no popularity. Right? But that aside, a popular candidate, a candidate who is popular because his policy propositions are giving power back to the American people that the government has wrongfully usurped for itself. And that's an important factor, right? But that's not the most disturbing thing about this. The most disturbing thing about this is that all of the factors that we can identify in this incident and information that has come out about the perpetrator in this incident indicates government bureaucracy involvement, the thing that everybody calls the deep state. It indicates that the branches of government that we rely on to maintain law and order in the country, the whole point of having this illegitimate thing that we refer to as government, the idea that some people are just destined to have authority over other people, and those other people just have to deal with it, right? They're involved from what it looks like. It looks very much like they're behind this, and they're looking for a way to exploit a person with vulnerabilities, with mental vulnerabilities and social vulnerabilities that make him an ideal patsy. And they've already started the search for the next one with by releasing this bounty offer purportedly from the first patsy, who, by the way, seemed to be able to engage in a lot of foreign travel with a rap sheet you could paper your walls with. Like, I don't know anybody else that can do that. Who was helping him do that? Who would do this? So we got a couple more super chats. I'm going to make sure I am not missing super chows too, because those are actually the most important. They're more important than the super chats, because they come directly to us, and it looks like we at least have one, because it's yep, oh, we have 3.
You'd be skipping.
Yep. So Nick gave us $5 and said you guys should check out the male feminist YouTuber Patriarchy. His videos are under 10 minutes, and it will be interesting to see you respond to his slander of men's rights activists. I will have to do that now. Not right this minute, but I mean, I'm definitely going to have to look at that. So thank you for that information, Nick. Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 325, honey for the Badgers. I think I put the wrong number in, because it's definitely 326. Richard Bier gave us $5 and said, tell me just why he was staking out that club for 12 hours when Don's round of golf was supposedly a spur-of-the-moment decision. That's a good question, too, but the president doesn't do things on the spur of the moment, and a former president, after he's been president for the rest of his life, he really can't do things spur of the moment. Everything he does, every place he goes, there has to be some level of preparation for his safety and security. So I don't know. I had not heard reports that it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but it may have been reported in the news up to that long prior. It's also possible that this dude was scouting that place every day, because sometimes the candidate would go there But it's also possible that he was told. Did someone know that someone was waiting at the fence line and happened to suggest that particular course to play, or was he waiting for any target of opportunity? Had Donald made different plans? And him being staked out with almost no concealment at all for all of those hours and nothing arousing suspicion in such an affluent neighborhood doesn't sit right when someone can get pulled over just for having a car that isn't as nice as the rest of the cars in that neighborhood. And just for the record, that does happen. I have experienced that. There's a hoity-toity wealthy neighborhood community, really. Dayton has, it's like a lot of other cities. There's Dayton proper, the municipal incorporated city of Dayton. And then there are a whole bunch of other smaller municipal incorporated towns and cities with borders that squish right up against the border of Dayton. And so as you're driving along, you go through an intersection, you were in Dayton, but now you're in Kettering. Or you were in Dayton, you were in Dayton, but now you're in Huber Heights. You were in Dayton, but now you're in Riverside. You were in Dayton, but now you're in, some other community. And there's a wealthy community to the west that, like, kind of the northwest of where I live, that I drove through when I was working for a pharmacy that had a policy that if somebody came to the store where I worked and they wanted a particular supplement and we didn't have it, instead of them sending them to another store, we would go to that store and bring it back and sell it to them from our store, so they didn't have to drive all over the community. And a lot of times people would call and say, do you have this in stock? And the answer is, we can get it. We can have it here by the time you get here. And so part of my job was to go to other stores. Well, I go to the store in this community in my ratty-ass looking zombie van, right? And I'm driving directly from the store where I work to the store where I got to pick up the thing, and then I'm going to bring it back. And so I wasn't stopping anywhere. I wasn't driving slowly, but I had to go through a residential neighborhood to get from point A to point B. And I'm about halfway through, and all of a sudden, there's lights behind me. I'm like, what the hell? Because I'm on the right side of the road. I stopped at the stop sign. I looked around to make sure there were no pedestrians because it's a residential neighborhood. There's a school nearby and everything. I was driving carefully. Didn't have any moving violations at all. And I wasn't stopping, right? I was going the speed limit. Wasn't obstructing traffic. There was literally no reason to pull me over. And I asked when the cop approached my window, what moving violation are you pulling me over for? And he didn't answer my question. He said, what are you doing in this neighborhood? And it took me about halfway through the conversation to figure out he thought I was a drug dealer because my van looked weird.
What?
I'm in a uniform that has the name of the company I work for on it. You can see it. It's on the sleeve that faces the cop. I pointed to it, and I'm like, I know, I just realized you think I'm a drug dealer. I work for this company. I am going from this store number at this location to that store number at that location to pick up this product to take it back. Right? So this idea of, like, people talk about this. And that was in a neighborhood that it's for here, that's Dayton, Ohio rich. That's not Mar-a-Lago rich. Right? Mar-a-Lago rich is a whole nother level of rich.
Yeah.
If you don't even have to look suspicious. You just have to not be familiar to people. I don't know this person. What's he doing in my neighborhood?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, to be fair to the cop, criminals do some stupid shit. Okay, so maybe he thought he got someone that was just, maybe he thought you were high. I don't know.
No, yeah,
but
he very clearly thought I was a drug dealer. Like, he thought I was looking for some place to deliver to, and
oh my God.
Well, you gotta understand. So my van that I was driving at that time, the base coat was this sort of metallic, bright computer screen background, like blue screen of death blue. Okay? And then over that, for most of the van, we had this ugly green Frankenstein skin color paint. And we had every place where there was a dent in a van, we painted injuries on there, blood and dripping down and all kinds of stuff. It had teeth painted over the grill. It had a big nose painted on the hood.
What kind of idiot drug dealer would be driving around in probably the most easily recognizable car? Like, what?
The kind
Somebody
of
that
drug
samples
dealer
their
with
own product.
with two geese and two cats slung over their back.
Yeah.
This is Ohio we're talking about.
This is Ohio. There was more than one time where I was treated as suspected drug dealer for actually, when I parked that car at the home of one of the guys I was going to court with, the neighbors across the street called the cops, and they had to go knock on his door and ask me to come out and explain why I was in the neighborhood. And the neighbor was standing out there, and they're like, this van has never been in this neighborhood before, and it looks weird. That's why I called. And they used the phrase drug dealer. Both the husband and the wife. We think this person's a drug dealer. I'm like, no, I'm not a drug dealer. I'm visiting this guy because I'm going to write articles about his court case. And those articles, by the way, have been taken down. But in any case, yeah, that whole situation, like, just hearing that, and people will be like, oh, you're getting paranoid, this doesn't happen. No, it's happened to me twice. And I'm female. So if I'd have been a dude, I think it would have been many more times, and it would have been much worse. I don't think the cops would have believed a word I said if I'd have been a dude. So here you'd have had
74 convictions.
Yeah. Well, he didn't have convictions. That's the key there. He had arrests, but your arrests don't go off your record either. You know, unless you get it expunged, and you have to go to court to get it expunged.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something that just goes away. It's just one of these things that, you know, you hear about it, and people like to dismiss it and everything, but it is really weird that a man alone, especially a man who looks like Gary Busey's unhinged younger cousin, hanging around an area that wealthy, who is not a regular part of that neighborhood. He's not known to the people in the neighborhood. And nobody was like, God, this guy, who is this guy? Why is he hanging around in this weird area that nobody hangs around in? What is he doing in this neighborhood? I'm calling the cops. Like, nobody did that. Very strange. But yeah. So this officer pointed out, it's not confirmed yet how Routh knew Trump would be on that golf course Sunday afternoon. It is suggested here that he may have had a laser focus on Trump, Forrest Gump focus, where he just simply did poor man surveillance, Googled Trump's frequent non-campaign activities, staked out a location, and was just there all the time. Which, again, if he was there that much, that makes it even more suspect, in my opinion. Right? But, yeah. And you would know, like, most people showing up to a golf course to play golf, they might have a car, or a van, or a truck, or an SUV, or whatever. Or there might be, you know, a couple of carloads of guys get out that are meeting there together to go play. But a whole caravan, that's probably the former president, especially that golf course. So, yeah, and he describes the caravan. And it looks like, the agents figured out from his phone where he was all that time. So, but back to Ben's here.
Have we covered the $150,000 reward?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I've mentioned that a couple times.
I've been distant for the first half hour of this show because I've been doing other things.
So yeah, we've mentioned it a couple times. One of my things about this is, right, we have this political environment right now that is very heated. There's been a lot of extreme rhetoric against Trump. There's been a lot of rhetoric intended to induce people to commit violence against other people. And it's not just coming from fringe nutbags on the internet. It's coming from senators and congressmen, mainstream media outlets, establishment press that gets to send reporters to the White House for press conferences. Right? They're the ones. The threat to our democracy line that keeps getting repeated over and over again. The statements that people shouldn't be able to go, if they're Trump supporters, they shouldn't be able to go anywhere or do anything without being harassed by opponents. That Trump's cabinet, his orbiters in Washington and so on shouldn't have been, right? All of that points to trying to inspire some nutjob or dumbass to take action that most people are smart enough to not do, because they will get caught, they will get arrested, and they will end up in trouble for the rest of their lives over it, or they'll get killed. So you got to find somebody that's gullible enough to do it, and that seems to be what that's all designed to do. And
I have to ask, what would happen if Trump did get assassinated? Who would take over the Republican nomination? Would it be J.D. Vance or would it be Nikki Haley?
Well, there's two possibilities. So the Democrat Party has set a precedent. Okay, Kamala Harris was not chosen during a primary as the presidential candidate. She was the running mate of the man chosen during a primary to be the presidential candidate. And then when he dropped out of the race, they just substituted her. They didn't have another primary. And we're like right on the edge of the election. Now, it's really close. It would be very difficult to organize and run a primary right now. So if something were to happen right now, the precedent set by the Democrat Party would justify the Republican Party just automatically switching and running Vance. But it's also possible that the Republican Party is better organized in terms of getting that shit done than the Democrat Party, and they could hold a primary. It's just unlikely that they would do it at this point. So that other possibility exists, but I doubt it's what would be opted for. So you would still have a candidate, and I'm sure that the Democrats would try to find a way to disqualify Vance. But they've set that precedent, and they can't, like, if they disqualify Vance, then they can't run Kamala, and the whole thing just has to be canceled, and whoa, all of a sudden we don't have an election, huh? That would be the other possibility. We got some more chats here, so let's see. Richard Bier gave us another $5 and said, my suspicion about why the press was holding off on publishing the Troon Manifesto was that there was pressure to not disparage Troons, no matter how unhinged that they can be, because it might lead to fewer kids getting nudged into that path. So anything published about Troons is required to be maximizing the glamour and adding extra glitter to the perception of that journey. And the media won't even differentiate between Troons and people who are actually trans. Like they won't acknowledge that there are people who are simply nuts or who are faking to gain an advantage that they shouldn't have. And then he added another $5 and said, if you want to be sure he has government ties, then someone should see if he can gain entry into Canada. Yeah, but it's kind of hard to arrange that right now. You can't just pick up the guy and put him on a plane and send him there. So, Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 Canadian and said that was a play on Forrest Gump. Yeah, we kind of figured that out, but it was also a very astute observation. The I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is. Neither of the two guys in the assassination attempts that we know about stands out as likely to be highly competent and intelligent and so on, based on the available evidence. That doesn't mean that Routh isn't, though, because there is another phenomenon that happens. It is entirely possible that he is a very competent agent playing dumb or playing crazy. Albert Nader Retro gave us another $2 Canadian and said, big hole, this is no time for Kamala puns, Hannah. I disagree. It is always time for puns.
Mm-hmm.
And Kamala Ding Dong is a big target. So, gin bottle, well, they didn't always call them, like, transvestites are just people who wear the opposite sex's clothes, but they usually at least try to look attractive. They, try to do it well. Troons don't even do that.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that for a century now, it's been okay for women to wear men's clothes.
Yeah.
To the point that now it's like, well, why wouldn't a woman wear pantsuits and boots and stuff? A woman can wear whatever she likes, but if a man wears dresses or skirts, well, he must be a woman,
or a weirdo,
or a weirdo, and
a woman has to go out in her underwear to be called that. By the way.
And yeah, there were two different ways of approaching this. One of which was, how about we just let men wear whatever they want and they can still be men? Like men can wear dresses, or men can wear culottes or whatever it is, like shorts that hang by a skirt or anything along those lines. Like, how about the idea that men can wear anything and still be men? No, that's not possible. Women can wear anything and still be women, but men cannot wear anything and still be men. If a man wears a dress or a skirt, then he's not just a man in a dress or a skirt. He's a woman. Like, I'm open to the possibility that men can wear anything and still be men. Like, because when you date this back to ancient Greek / ancient Roman times, people wore togas or short togas or whatever have you. In fact, in ancient Greek times, men wore shorter garments than women. Mm-hmm. In fact, men wore what we would nowadays call miniskirts, and it was fine. In fact, men did wear miniskirts, and women wore long
gowns,
long dresses.
Yeah, they were like
that,
gowns,
and that was the thing, and it was fine because people weren't weirded out by the sight of a man's legs. But nowadays, they very much are, because it makes men look vulnerable, and because for whatever reason, we now live in a society. we live in a society where seeing a man's skin is not acceptable.
Yeah.
But seeing a woman's entire skin is like, well, you just have to accept that. They're not whores. Yep. Even though they happen to be wearing the uniform of a whore, it's not. Women can wear anything they like, and it's fine. But women have to continue wearing these penguin suits, these Undertaker costumes. And if they don't wear these Undertaker costumes, then they must be women. Like this is not the equality that you people think it is. Like we're continuing to demand that a man must cover every inch of his skin, and if he doesn't, then he's a woman. Like this is not
it's
equality.
Crazy,
like,
right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's men have never been able to men have never been able to publicly dress in a way that is intended just as a sexual display, and then claim with credibility, or at least be believed when they claim, I'm not putting on this sexual display for sexual purposes. Like, it's always recognized and responded to as a sexual display when men do that. But women always have had this capability of denying what they're doing, and still doing the obviously exact thing they're denying. And now it's to the point where, like, things that would have been embarrassing for a woman to do 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago are like fashion statements now. And by that I mean there is underwear now that is intended to fake having a camel toe on purpose. Mm-hmm. It makes your shorts look like you have them pulled up too far, and like it makes me think of that stupid song, "Is Your Coochie Hungry 'Cause It's Eating Your Shorts?" Like, the song's called Camel Toe, and it's sort of a reference to how, you know, if you're a girl and you're out with your friends and one of them has their shorts is showing, like, hey, you can see the split between the two sides of your labia there. You gotta pull those out of your crotch so people can't see that. Like, it's like telling somebody, hey, you need deodorant. Let's go. I'll keep watch while you go wash off in the bathroom a little bit. You stink. You try to say it so that everybody else doesn't hear it, so you're not embarrassing the person. You're saving them the embarrassment. And now it's something that women do on purpose to show off, right? Same thing of, like, and there's been a sort of slow creep of this. I remember when I first started wearing a bra, my t-shirt slid off the side one day, and my friend comes up behind me and says, really quietly, "Your integrity is showing." And I'm like, what? What the fuck does that mean, right? Your integrity is showing. That sounds like a good thing. And I kind of looked at her, and she could see my confusion, and she goes, "Oh, your bra." And because it was supposed to be an embarrassment. A couple years later, I'm seeing magazine articles about fashion designed to show off your bra straps. That was in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, like, all this. But guys, if a guy walks around with his underwear sticking up out of his pants, people make fun of him, right? Look at that guy, he thinks this is cool looking. And it does kind of look ridiculous when your pants are down halfway down your thighs and you have to hold them up in order to walk. But it also looks ridiculous if you're walking around with pants that have the waistband too far down below your waistline, and by design, so that at the same time you have a camel toe and your underwear is sticking up out of your pants. I don't care if it's a thong. It's not sexy. It's not cute. It looks ridiculous. It looks like you couldn't dress yourself and you bought clothes that were too small for you. But enough old lady talk.
And this isn't to say that men should wear the kind of dress where they have their underwear hanging over things. That seems to be the progressive way of things, and this is why so many men are starting to dress like women have dressed for the past half century. Like, the alternative is, like, maybe women never should have dressed in this in this way in the first place.
Yeah, in this ridiculous manner. Yeah, dressing like a woman is nothing to aspire to be honest.
And it's not even dressing like a woman; it's dressing like a child. It's dressing like a baby.
Yeah.
Like you're wearing as few things as possible, and it's okay for a baby, because nobody gets those weird feelings from seeing the entire skin of a baby. But the fact that women are dressing like babies now, where their entire skin is on display, we think of this as normal, and there's this whole faction of people that think this is so normal that men should dress like that as well, and if they don't, that they're being non-progressive stuff. But progressive is the wrong word for it. The idea that adults should dress like babies, like we're being told that men should express themselves in the way women do. But maybe here's another idea. Maybe women should dress like men, like covering themselves up. Maybe the fact that we've done this throughout all of history is the way forward. Like, I know there's this biblical idea of the Garden of Eden, and suddenly we realized we were naked and that we should cover up, and that maybe this is a little bit too conservative. But maybe there's a lesson to be learned from this story.
Well, and there's another aspect to this as well. All right, men's clothing is very utilitarian. Even men's fancy dress clothing, even men's leisure clothing, where men are relaxed and everything, is all pretty much designed to be utilitarian. Men's swimwear, designed to be pretty comfortable, designed to be utilitarian. It's designed for purpose. You get a little into the weeds when you start discussing things like Art Force brought up Speedos, but Speedos are basically designed to not create drag when you're trying to swim, so if you want to swim really fast. And it's why, like in women's bathing suits for swim teams, you do not see a suit with a skirt. Like I wear a swimming suit with a skirt. But like in any case, like a lot of women don't do that. But you know, I'm married. Nobody needs to see my ass but my husband. So everybody else can relax, and nobody needs to see my old lady ass but my husband. So I think that's fair, right? But if I was on a swim team and I wanted something that didn't create drag, then yeah, I would wear a regular suit. And a lot of women on swim teams now wear bikini swimwear for that reason, right? And the same thing with running sports. A lot of times those uniforms have been minimized for purpose. But the difference between men's fashion and women's fashion is often that men don't get to have any point in time where they are not expected to be doers. And so they can't wear clothing that prevents them from being doers. They can't wear clothing that makes it hard to walk, hard to run, hard to jump, hard to bend, that they can't get dirty, and that kind of thing. That's why suits usually come in dark colors. It's why, God, I can't think of his name. We did a speaker it's because it was clear back in, I think, 2016. Scottish guy came in and talked about how men's collars identify them. We identify men's purpose in life: blue collar, white collar, priest collar, and so on. Women don't experience anything like that. Even women who are quote-unquote blue-collar workers don't have to think of themselves that way.
Yeah, I made a tweet like a week ago. I think it was on Sunday. I showed a picture of a dapper gentleman with a three-piece suit. It was all black with an umbrella and the bowler hat and stuff. And I said, "This is the English national dress."
Yeah.
The reason that it seems as though the English have no culture is because the entire world has appropriated it. and that was my biggest tweet ever.
Yeah.
It was my biggest bang rate. It got like 3,000 likes. It's by far more than I've ever had, and obviously I got I was swamped by the two different factions of people saying this didn't happen, and another group of people saying this did happen, but it was a bad thing. Like people saying nobody wears a suit. Nobody wears this jacket and trousers ensemble anywhere in the world. And then there's a bunch of other people saying, well, yes, people all over the world wear this, but it was because the English enforced it on everyone. And I'm even bringing up the Japanese. I'm like, even the Japanese in their business environments wear this two-piece suit. They even call it a sabiro, which I believe is derived from Savile Row. It's the Japanese word for Savile Row, because Savile Row is this street in London where these very dapper business suits were made, and yeah, it's, but to some degree it is this two-edged sword that the whole world has taken on this
uniform,
the uniform of what was once the English businessman. It was once the English national dress, and it seems to have taken over throughout the world because it's a way for a man to be to sort of look smart without showing off his body, but at the same time, if he has the right suit, it does show off his body. And yes, it is the uniform of an undertaker. This is largely because of Queen Victoria. After Prince Albert died, she sort of almost forced everyone in higher society to wear this undertaker uniform, and it took off because in so many countries over the world, it's traditional for a man to not to show off his skin, but to cover his entire skin in a way that that looks smart, that sort of shows off his body without showing off his skin. And it's difficult to get this across to people, especially when you point out that this dress was invented by the English, and it was adopted by all kinds of people, not just countries that were colonized by the English, but countries like Japan that were never colonized, because it was just taken on board as this fantastic way of men looking smart, without looking whorish or whatever.
It's actually a way to communicate gravitas, and a way to communicate sobriety, credibility, that you mean business, that you're not at your leisure where you are, and that you are there to engage in work for profit. And it's an interesting phenomenon, because it's something that is expected and required of men, that when they go places and do things, like I'm sure that vacationing was invented by women, because men are always building, creating, investing, growing capital, growing empires, growing land ownership, growing connections in business, and so on.
Yeah, and this what I didn't try to get across is that this is just the national English dress for men, much like the national Scottish dress for men is a kilt and a sporran and whatever goes over the torso for that. And there's a different thing for the Irish and a different thing for the Welsh. but none of this applies to women.
Right. Women didn't have to wear that.
Yeah, there is no national English dress for women, and there's no national Scottish dress for women, or Welsh or Irish.
Well, there is, but it's not made to imply labor.
It's not worn
to understand that.
It's not worn at weddings or
Right.
funerals. Whereas at weddings or funerals or offices or
Right.
in the courts, men have to wear these suits because it's how you it's how you conform. It's how you look the same as everyone else. But women aren't confined to that. Like English women or Scottish women or Welsh women or
It's dropped
Irish
off.
women.
It's dropped off.
They can wear whatever they want. It's much the same as throughout the anglicized world. Women
historically
in any situation can
historically
wear
historically there was a way that women were supposed to look, and women made that change. Women chose to move forward in how their fashions were designed as their roles relaxed in society and became less strict, and women began having more leeway regarding what they did and what they did not do. But it used to be like the men would wear in Scotland, men would wear the tartan kilt, and women would wear the tartan sash over their dress. Like, 'cause they didn't wear the kilt. But
it's no longer the case.
It's no longer the case with women. Women have escaped from that, or women have abandoned that, whichever way you want to. I like abandoned a little bit better because I think there were purposes for it historically, but men have not. They've not escaped from it, and they've not abandoned it. And it relates to what we've been talking about tonight in this one way. Men are pre-programmed in every way, right down to the clothes you wear, okay, to have a utilitarian purpose as the purpose in their life. And so when you take every message that you are directing at a group of men, every media message, every news media message, every print media message, every entertainment media message, every political message, social media messages, that, hey, we need some guy to sacrifice himself by doing this thing that is going to destroy his life one way or another in order to get this threat out of the way, a man will answer. Whether the situation is true or false, whether the propaganda is valid, which it's not usually, or invalid, whether what he's going to do is going to make the difference that he's being told or not, they will show up. Men show up, and they do these things. And they're that programmed to be utilitarian that you just add in a little bit of gullibility. It doesn't take being a complete and utter simp. It doesn't take being a complete and utter rube. Just a little bit of gullibility. And you have a guy who can be convinced to do what Routh did. And you have a guy that can be convinced to do the work that Routh has a history of doing. And I mean, it convinced a large group of men in 2020, 2019 actually, 2018 even, clear up through 2022, to riot and burn large sections of their own country in the United States. Whole neighborhoods, whole communities, looted, robbed, set on fire, people threatened, people's pets dragged out of their homes and killed. Like, that all happened because you can activate men with programming because they're already pre-programmed to be utilitarian. If you take a set of beliefs and add those in, and you take some gullibility and you add that in, you take some disenfranchisement, some social unrest, and you add that in, and then you give them marching orders, there will be men who will show up and march. This is how men get exploited by society. And until in high enough numbers until an overwhelming majority of men say, fuck you, no. Fuck you very much. Not doing it. Not marching. Fix your own damn shit. This will continue.
And it kind of shows you that women want men to conform to a uniform. And men kind of don't want women to conform to a uniform. They're quite happy to let women wear whatever they want, which is quite in opposition to the overriding narrative that we're being fed in our in not just our legacy media, but our overriding education system. The men need to do what they're told, and men and women can do whatever they want. Which I guess arguably is fine, because a lot of men are like, when they go to a wedding, they're like, okay, good, I don't have to think about what I have to wear. I just have to wear a penguin suit.
Yeah.
It takes away all those decisions. I'm like, okay, I don't have to think creatively. I just have to wear exactly the same thing that all the other men are wearing. And and feminists and other such people will look at this and go, oh, it's so difficult for women because they have to think about what they have to wear, whereas men just have to wear the same thing. And like, yeah, that's the case. But if the shoe was on the other foot, you'd be going, oh, women have to wear all the same thing. Women have to all conform to the same conformity, whereas men can do whatever they like.
Yeah, women don't have to do anything. There's no have to do in women's lives. Everything we do is a choice. Everything we do is a choice in which nobody else has a say. And with a large majority of women, if our choice results in consequences that are negative or that we're unhappy with or that inflict suffering or disadvantage or some other adversity on other people, we don't even get held accountable for that. And as a result, women fail at a lot of things that men would succeed at because women don't learn to make better choices. But when it comes to the whole uniform thing, aside from how it relates to this story, I don't want men to be limited to uniforms. But if you're going to wear one anyway, think about what it communicates when you put it on, when people see that uniform, what expectations that tells them that they are entitled to have, what opinions they're likely to form, and decide for yourself. Am I proud? Am I satisfied? Because we use the word pride, I think we overuse the word pride, but am I satisfied with what this uniform communicates? That it's an accurate communication. This is me. This uniform is me. And I'm comfortable communicating that to other people about myself. Because if that's not the case, don't wear that uniform. Even if it's a suit. Even if it's highly attractive. If you're not comfortable with what it tells other people about you, ditch it. Wear something else. In any case, I'm going to get back to what Mike Benz was saying here. But what we've seen so far is a tip of the iceberg as to what I want to talk about. So if we get too far into this and we're not getting very far in that, I'm going to continue this next week. Because I really want to get into a discussion about Routh's activities in Ukraine. And that pause isn't just pregnant, it's going to give birth in 2 weeks, right? It's that pregnant. Not just a little pregnant. To quote, God, what was it? Fiddler on the Roof, I think. But that was a very pregnant pause. His activities in Ukraine. Oh, play, damn it. this is an issue, I think, with my internet.
Paramilitary muscle for the CIA DoD work there. And then you add the very strange protection aura that Routh has had for years. This is a guy who has 74 arrests on his record, but never spent a day in jail. And I gave this to your producers if they want to pull up slide number 3,
please,
which is the Daily Mail article. And let me know if you need the link to that. You can just Google the article name just from the image. But
failed Trump assassin, racked up extensive rap sheet, felonies, petty crimes, never spent a day in prison.
Right. Yeah, this include larceny, brandishing a weapon of mass destruction, a machine gun, a hit and run in his car, 74.
I don't know why it's doing that.
It
We
gives the
did.
time to digest what's
but
being
never
said.
spent a day in
Yeah.
jail. And then you add the fact that immediately after this happened, if your producer pulls up the link that is slide 10, this is the CIA targeting officer in 2023.
Oh, for Pete's sake. I hope this doesn't mean that that's been taken down, because that would suck. I'm going to try something here. We're just going to change how I'm looking at this. I wanted to keep it smaller so you could see the whole thing, but I may have to... switch this to... see if I can change the window here. And... get it started playing again. Nope, it won't do it that way either. Alright. Gonna open this in a new tab. We are at 333 on it. See if it reloads. Watch it be gone. Hopefully not. Because it wasn't gone when I got ready to start the show.
It's kind of ironic that Twitter renamed itself. Symbol normally click on to close.
Yeah.
How gunmen get so close to President Trump.
Pause this.
I got.
And find... Oop, that's way far ahead. There we go. Okay, so there's a link there. That's why it looked weird, but it's that constantly trying to reload thing. I'm going to close the other tab. I don't know why this sometimes fixes it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to this time, but we just got our equipment replaced by Spectrum about a week ago because it was 10 years old. And it was, the functions were ceasing to work. So we got this brand new equipment, our Wi-Fi equipment and everything. It looks like completely different design and everything. And for some reason, it's occasionally throttling the feed. So I don't know what's going on with that. We may have to get new equipment again. Kind of sucks. All right.
Who claimed to actually put out a bolo, a be on the lookout. This is over a year ago for this exact individual, Ryan Routh, but nothing was done. Then you have the...
I just want to point out, we just heard the was known to law enforcement agencies trope. That's what was just stated there. We've heard that, dozens of times. in conjunction with people that you later find out that prior to their commission of whatever crime is being politicized, they were in communications with and being nudged towards the commission of the crime by FBI agents, CIA agents, Homeland Security, whoever they were talking to.
Yeah.
So
how many times do you have to hear he was on our radar before it occurs to you that means he was on our employment roster?
Well, or sometimes I don't think sometimes that men know they're on the employment roster. They think they're accomplishing something. Somebody says a political opinion online, and the next thing you know, there's an FBI agent talking to them about, do this. This is maybe you need to do this. Ooh. Lauren, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I'm good. My neck was, neck did something really weird.
Oh, yeah. That happens to me sometimes. And I'll get a lightning bolt down my arm. That's a pinched nerve. But yeah, the on our radar trope, I've become more sensitive to that ever since during the incident when there was a kidnapping attempt on the governor of Michigan, and early on, everybody's these right-wing extremists, blah 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 blah. They did this, they did that. They were gonna do all these things, and it's common right-wing behavior, and blah blah blah. And then you find out that actually they had mentally compromising conditions, and that everybody involved, except for the two guys with the mentally compromising conditions, was an agent of law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and all of the planning was done by the agents of federal law enforcement, and all of the the acquisition of supplies and tools for the job were done by the agents of federal law enforcement. They did everything to ensure that these two guys who never would have been competent to get as far as they did in attempting a crime like that, much less thought of it themselves, would try it. And I started looking into that phenomenon and discovered that they'd done this to other men, and they'd done it to underage teenagers, 17-year-old schizophrenic boy, so it's a phenomenon. It's not just a thing that, it's a conspiracy theory and it never happened. No, it's been reported on in the news repeatedly that this kind of thing happens, and it can only happen so many times before the excuse that the agents got overzealous and lost track of the line between entrapment and catching somebody who was actually going to commit a crime without their interference. They lost track of where that is. No, they pushed it. They were deliberately attempting to get this to happen. And it's like something that was explained to me back in the early 90s when, if you saw a police car, it usually still had somewhat of a boxy appearance, or they would have, SUVs, but there was an obvious light bar on top. And so if you had a cop behind you on the road, you knew they were a cop, right? And this guy explained to me that when he was on patrol, if he thought a driver looked like they might be the type to engage in road ragey activities, he would tailgate them to see how they would respond to another driver being rude on the road, and see if they did something that could be interpreted as road rage and a moving violation. And I remember the argument we had at the time, because my first thought was, most people, when they notice there's a cop behind them, they get really nervous. They assume they're speeding or something else, and they'll make a mistake because of being nervous. And like me, if there's somebody tailgating me, I think I'm driving too slow. And I start looking around for speed limit signs to see if I'm supposed to be going 20 miles faster per hour than I am. And sometimes that causes me to lose my attention a little bit on the road directly in front of me, and I know it, and I'll slow down a little bit. Well, that could easily be interpreted as brake checking, even though I'm not applying my brakes, right? So, which, don't tailgate people, it's really stupid. It still hurts when you get into an accident if you rear end somebody. But in any case, law enforcement has a tendency to do this. Like, they don't look at the public as people they're trying to protect. Every person that they meet is a suspect that probably has some sort of criminal intent, and they just need to find out what it is. There's a lot of law enforcement that looks at the public that way. And it's partly because of how they're trained in their police academy training, or their various law enforcement branch training, that everybody is a criminal. You just have to figure out the way this specific individual is engaging in crime.
It's much like the question of why is no one trying to assassinate Kamala Harris. And I'm not saying anyone should. I'm very emphatically saying no one should. Not just because I don't think anyone should, but because if I did, I would be arrested. And that's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
If anyone did even imply it, or if anyone said anything that even sounded like they might be implying it, they would. The FBI would raid their house at a moment's notice and arrest them. As well they should, because no one should be advocating for the assassination of a presidential candidate. And there's a couple of reasons that no one advocates for the assassination of Kamala. Partly because they wouldn't get away with it, and partly because they know that it wouldn't make a damn difference. Because even if Kamala died yesterday, they would have Tim Walz in place, and someone else in place in the Obama regime, and it kind of wouldn't make a difference because there's an endless supply of mindless communists who do what they're told for money, and that's what's so crucially different from Trump. Trump is there because he can't be bought off. He's there because he does what he thinks is right for America. And if you try and buy him off, he'll be like, you can't buy me off. I've got billions of dollars in the bank, regardless of what you've always attempted to bankrupt me of. Which goes to show you why democracy is such a failed system, because it's all too often run by people who are trying to make money, and if someone comes in who's not interested in making money, someone who's just interested in doing what's best for the American people, the system, dare I say the deep state, is terrified of that kind of person because they can't be controlled. The deep state wants someone like Kamala Harris, someone they can pay off to do exactly what they want. Right?
Yeah. So let's go on with this a little bit. Hopefully it'll play now.
CIA analysts warned about Trump assassin's suspect criminal behavior in 2023. So the CIA was
Yes.
targeting him?
Yes.
Can you please unpack this very quickly for us?
This is Sarah Adams. I think she's been on the Sean Ryan show several times. She's a public figure, and she put out a series of tweets, if your producer can find it, on X, where she, as soon as this news broke, she said, "Oh my God, that's the guy. That's the guy I put out a bolo on because of his highly suspicious activities." Now I can talk a little bit about these Actually, I want to talk about one quick thing before I transition to what those suspicious activities are, because I just want to sort of set the stage about how protected this person is. So not only did the Justice Department protect him against 74 arrests from ever spending a day in jail, not only did a rank and file CIA targeting officer put out a bolo for him, but then you have, if you go to slides 3, 4, and 5 in the deck that I sent, and if you can pull up that Just the News article by John Solomon, if you look, but this just broke today.
We're going to go back there.
What you see is that Routh.
Stop. All right. See if it'll go back to. All right, that was it right there. All right. Suspected Trump assassin flagged by U.S. during return from Ukraine, but Homeland Security, refused probe. Okay, so he's trying to enter the U.S. He was flagged during his return from a war zone. And he was flagged for Homeland Security, and they're like, nah, we're not going to look into this guy. We don't think this is any big deal. Let's compare that to a chick who says things on the internet. That's it. She makes political statements on the internet. She's gone to gatherings that have included people having political discussions. There has been no recruitment of anything to do anything illegal or violent or be on a particular side of any military conflict or anything like that. Just discussion, speech, talking about the best way to solve issues faced by a group of people. Got banned from the United States for 5 years for being a little inarticulate about explaining what the gathering she was going to was about and why she was there. But this guy can be flagged after returning from a war zone without even talking about what his activities there were. Just returning from a war zone. Guy from returning from a war zone gets flagged as he tries to re-enter the United States. And Homeland Security's like, yeah, no, we don't care. No big deal. Don't worry about this guy. He's okay. Let him through. Very strange. Just pointing that out. And it's going to be, there goes the stupid
news
circle
article
again.
by John Solomon.
Yeah.
If you look, but this just broke today, and what you see is that Routh was coming back from a trip that took him again through this crisscross. So he was interviewed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials when he returned back to Hawaii from Ukraine last year. He was flagged by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, based on these highly suspicious comments that he was making. They referred it to DHS. And as we'll see, a very specific wing of DHS that, Benny, you and I have talked about many, many times, because it's the exact wing of DHS responsible for many aspects of the January 6th Fedsurrection and many suspicious aspects of Trump assassination attempt number 1. But just continuing, it says the records show that CBP officials knew that Routh had traveled to Warsaw, Poland, near the Ukraine border, to Istanbul, Turkey, which is the major site where we train the Kurdish terrorists and then ship them into Syria. Turkey is the major CIA training ground and staging ground for, if you look. But this just broke today, and what you see is that Routh was coming back from a trip that took him again through this crisscross. So he was interviewed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials when he returned back to Hawaii from Ukraine last year. He was flagged by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, based on these highly suspicious comments that he was making. They referred it to DHS. And as we'll see, a very specific wing of DHS that Benny, you and I have talked about many, many times, because it's the exact wing of DHS responsible for many aspects of the January 6th Fedsurrection and many suspicious aspects of Trump assassination attempt number one. But just continuing, it says the records show that CBP officials knew that Routh had traveled to Warsaw, Poland, near the Ukraine border, to Istanbul, Turkey, which is the major site where we train the Kurdish terrorists and then ship them into Syria. Turkey is the major CIA training ground and staging ground for shipping human warriors and military equipment from. In 2022 and 2020.
So just to make clear what is being said there, all right? This is a war-torn area. Like, he's visiting war-torn areas that you don't go into for tourism. He's going to these places where there is a large amount, like, highly organized, highly invasive, highly secretive, often, and a highly interfering activity by United States intelligence agencies and United States military and paramilitary organizations to engage in international warcraft, essentially, around a whole variety of countries, and interference in the political and military government development activities, changes, conditions in multiple countries. And we've been doing that, our country has been doing that for decades. It's not new. In fact, people are familiar with the name of Al-Qaeda. People are familiar with the name of ISIS. People are familiar with the terminology around them being terrorists and everything in regard to various places in the Middle East, but in particular Afghanistan, right? But not everybody is aware of how Al-Qaeda formed. So the history behind that is a proxy war that occurred in Afghanistan between the United States and Russia after the Soviet Union, attempted to end the Afghanistan civil war that was taking place prior to that. And the religious fighters, the people in Afghanistan whose dog in the fight involved their religious beliefs, that were trying to stabilize the country around their religious beliefs rather than around any other set of ideals, or any other set of morals or ethics, specifically their religious beliefs. The United States backed those people. There's a name for that type of organization. I can't think of what they're called. It starts with an M, and it sounds like it belongs in Dune instead of history. But in any case, they were thought of as the underdogs, the good guys, the people that were going to save Afghanistan from the conditions that caused the Civil War and the conditions that the Civil War caused. And Russia was the bad guys. They were trying to not put those guys in control and blah, blah, blah. Those guys became Al-Qaeda. And the implications of that, anybody that is aware of what happened with the United States and Al-Qaeda and Afghanistan and everything that's happened since then should be aware of the implications of that. Right? You can joke about it. The United States is the Batman. We create our own enemies, right? But when it comes down to it, there's a question. Why do we keep creating our own enemies? It's not an accident when it happens over and over and over again. It's an accident when it happens once and you learn from it and you're like, well, obviously we can't interfere that way because this happens. maybe we should just keep our nose out of that shit. No, they do it in South American countries. They do it in Middle Eastern countries. They do it in Far Eastern countries. Like, it's happened over and over again. So what he's talking about here is the man who was able to travel internationally with a wallpaper-sized list of criminal allegations that were serious, that were things that don't just get dropped without an investigation and some attempt at prosecution, right? The guy who was able to hang around as a complete stranger, as a fucked up looking complete stranger, no less, in a wealthy neighborhood where people are paranoid about people they don't know. Right? That guy was able to go to war zones, back and forth between war zones in the United States, repeatedly. And not only did he not face any repercussions for that, but when he was flagged by Border Patrol for Homeland Security to start asking him questions, Homeland Security was like, no, we don't have to do that. You let him go. You don't need to see his identification. Move along. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Again, it's not proof, solid, rock solid, undeniable proof of anything untoward, but it sure is interesting. Very strange.
So for years. Now it says here recruiting as many as.
Oop, Mike, were you talking?
I just said we're all the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, we're all the droids you're looking for. Yeah, that's true.
100 foreign fighters from Taiwan, Afghanistan, Moldova. But according to his own numbers, it's far more than that. We have tweets of him talking about how he has stacks of 5,000 Afghan passports that he's working with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev to get no-look visas toward, which is...
Okay, so this is another thing, all right? So now, up to now, what I've been focusing on talking about is his travel. What he's talking about there, sorry, Routh was going to various locations in war zones and in areas where he's coming into contact with terrorists that are known enemies to the United States. Or at least the public knows them as enemies to the United States. To recruit people to fight in the Ukraine war. Sorry. It's allergy season. What can I say? And I'm still getting over COVID. So it's the worst possible time to be getting over a sinus infection, which COVID is basically now like the flu plus a sinus infection. But in any case, all right, so you think about this. Right? I know there's a lot of people that are passionate about their position on Ukraine. Some people are very supportive of one side or the other, and some people are very supportive of United States involvement on the Ukrainian side. And they're passionate about it too. Like they're not just passionate about it, they're passionate about it. It's something that if you disagree with them, you get told off and blocked or reported, on Twitter for it. And or other social media, or
you have to be on one side or the other.
Yeah, you get a shouting match, right?
If you're not on the side of Ukraine, you must be on the side of Russia. There's no in between. Right?
I'm on the side of no U.S. citizens getting shot. That's what I'm on the side of. I don't want anybody being told they have to go fight there. I'm on the side of no Ukrainian citizens being forced to war. Because the people that it's happening to, it's happening to young people, and they're all boys. They're all guys that are just on the cusp of boyhood and manhood, or guys who were in the military and now they're like too old to fight, but the military's desperate, right? I don't think people should be forced into that. Especially not based on their sex.
It's reminiscent of the Iraq War from 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago, well, if you're not on our side, then you're on the side of the terrorists. We have to defeat the evil that is Saddam Hussein. And, you know, there's a case to be made for that, just like there's a case to be made against the evil dictator that is Putin. But there's a case to be made for, like, maybe that's none of our business. And the case is just as viable today as it was all that time ago. Like, I wish Thomas Jefferson was alive today so we could ask him. I wish any of the founding fathers were alive today. I wish Kennedy was. I mean, John F. Kennedy was alive today, but he wasn't because the CIA killed him because he didn't want to get involved in foreign wars, and they killed him.
No. So if you or I, you know, speaking to everybody, listeners, you know, present, future, co-hosts, everybody, if one of us decided that we wanted to support a foreign nation's war, Ukraine, Israel, I don't know, whatever's going on in a variety of places in the world right now, it's like, well, these are the good guys, they're the underdogs, we would like to support them. You know, people like me, like if I was going to do that, I would try to raise awareness, maybe find an organization that's raising money to send supplies to help people who are in those areas not suffer too much disadvantage because of the war, or to help make the military there stronger or whatever. And that's probably the maximum I might think of doing. Some men, the maximum that they might think of doing, as opposed to what a woman would do, they might just themselves go over and try to enlist or help with the cause, or work with organizations that are, again, over there attempting to get supplies to people. Like, this village is cut off from getting groceries and stuff. Well, we'll truck them in there at our own risk. You know, that kind of thing. Men will take it a step further. That's probably the limit of what your average everyday citizen would have thought to do. And there are men that did do that. There are men from the United States that got passports and visas and traveled to Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict and joined military forces or paramilitary forces and tried to assist in the conflict on the Ukrainian side. And that's their business if they want to do that. It's not anybody else's business to say, well, you can't do that. And it's not a big deal, right? But that's not what this guy did. Initially, he says he did that, right? He claims to have done that and been turned down because of his age. In a country that is currently drafting men who are over 60 years old with health conditions that would normally keep them out of the military. Oh, no, they wouldn't take me because I was too old. I'm in my 50s, right? I don't believe that. I don't actively disbelieve that, but he's going to need to show some evidence for me to make a solid, yeah, that's true. I'll accept that, because it goes in contradiction to everything else the country's doing, right? So he claims that's his reason for getting into this recruitment effort. But the reason I titled this, Who Would Do This? The reason I titled this live stream, Who Would Do This? Can you imagine, would you have imagined, prior to hearing about Routh and what he's doing, anyone doing what he's doing, would you have imagined anyone thinking, oh, well, okay, well, I'm too old to do anything as any part of the Ukrainian military, even working in supply, even working in some kind of non-combat capacity as a support for the military. I can't even do that. I'm so out of shape, old, incompetent, whatever, that they don't even want me cleaning their latrines. So I guess I'll go deep into terrorist organization territory and start trying to recruit enemies of the United States that have a history of killing stray Americans in their territory to fight in this conflict that has absolutely jack all to do with them. Like, what individual is going to even have that thought uninfluenced by anybody else? Why would that even occur to somebody? Like, you get my point here? This is weird.
I mean, the United States was built on saying we don't give a fuck about all your foreign policies. Fuck your tea.
Yeah.
And at this point, y'all are expected to say, not only do we care about tea, we care about, I don't know, but we need to pay billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Yeah, but I mean, how do you get from, okay, I'm gonna put a little flag in my name on social media to show my support from this country, to I'm going deep into terrorist territory to try to persuade people who they have a history of cutting the heads off of Americans that wander into their territory. I'm going to go there and get these people to help fight this war in this country that has they have no reason to care about. None. Right? And the other thing is, do you guys know how to get... I never even heard of a no-look visa before. I didn't even know what that was. This guy's talking about having stacks of them. Now, either he is completely nuts and talking out of his ass, and somehow, like, I don't know if y'all remember Mr. Magoo. He's not on a cartoon anymore because he's considered politically incorrect. But he was a cartoon of a guy with severe vision impairment. So he would be considered like one of those people that's like legally blind, but they can see, they just can't see well enough to do anything or see any detail.
Like Stevie Wonder. Like Stevie Wonder can tell.
Yeah, a little bit of light and shadow gets through.
He can tell if there's a mic stand falling on it. And everyone goes, he's not blind. No,
he can see a little bit of light and shadow motion and stuff. Or, but Mr. Magoo, so he would know there was a cat, but he couldn't see any detail, stuff like that, right? And his shtick was because he was so badly vision impaired, he's walking around in the world just barely being missed by falling pianos and speeding cars, and has confrontations with muggers that, because he doesn't know that he's being mugged, he just doesn't participate in the mugging, and the mugger eventually gets frustrated and goes away. Like, he'd have to be like that in ISIS territory to get back out of there. Yeah, Leslie Nielsen played him in a live-action film. There was, yes, Amasang says, wasn't there a Mr. Magoo version of A Christmas Carol? Yes, there was. And from the standpoint of somebody with bad vision, who... My vision has been a lot worse in my past than it is now, but it's never been quite that bad. There are aspects of that are funny just because I could see that kind of thing happening to me if my vision starts going the way that it indicates, right? I would be that person.
By the way, I have to sit here taking it all when someone describes someone else as myopic.
Yeah.
That's such a myopic worldview. And I'm sat here rattling my glasses going, is that not ableist?
Yeah. I am myopic, and I have astigmatism. Doesn't have anything to do with scratching your ass. When I take my glasses off and I look at a set of stairs, it looks like a little kid drew 'em over a regular set of stairs. It's just a mess. So yeah, I have double vision without my glasses because my nearsightedness is not the same amount in both eyes, and then my astigmatism in both eyes goes in different directions each from the other eye, and is to a different degree each from the other eye. So I get this weird, like, watching a 3D movie without 3D glasses kind of an effect that includes warping of things, as if, you're looking through the kind of glass that you put up in bathroom windows, basement bathroom windows, so that light gets in, but you can't see clearly enough to really understand what's on the other side. So, but I can see well enough now, like it's improved enough now that, for instance, about 20 feet away from me is a television screen with, it's got a PlayStation hooked up to it, and the start screen for a game is on there, and I can read all of the text. Some of it, from this perspective, would be maybe 8-point text on a page. It's hard, but I can still read it. So it's completely changed. But I was at a point in my 20s where if I took off my glasses and I wasn't on a flat surface, I was going to trip over something and fall because I couldn't see the difference between a flat surface and a surface with objects in front of me. And I couldn't go up and down stairs without my glasses at all. Right? So if I can laugh at Mr. Magoo, you got no business being mad about him. But yeah, this guy, he'd have to be Mr. Magoo. He'd have to be the Pink Panther in the old Pink Panther cartoons, where he goes to do something dangerous and the whole scene changes by chance or by Rube Goldberg method just to prevent him from getting injured. In order to do what he did and be just completely some average citizen in the United States that just stumbled into this and stumbled through all this and did all these weird things and nothing bad happened to him. It's just, like I said, it's not solid, irrefutable proof that he's some kind of, CIA asset or government agent or patsy or whatever. But it sure is weird. Everything about this, none of it is, like I said at the beginning, none of it is solid proof, right? But it sure is weird. But the thing I want to talk about here, when you look at the history involved, what is Al-Qaeda? What is ISIS? Who are these guys? Who would do what they do? And who would think to recruit those guys and why? Those are incels that have been made patsies by their own leadership. Men with no prospects, men with disenfranchisement as their main experience in life, men with conditions of adversity facing them at every angle, that had some charismatic leader or some charismatic organization communicate to them, your life will be improved if you join us, fight the battle that we're fighting, and win. Men that had no hope, that were taken in by charismatic con artists and told, here's your hope, we'll give you hope, but you have to be ready to be completely and utterly ruthless, murderous, brutal, called evil by the rest of the world. But we'll give you hope, and we're going to win. Right? There is a history throughout the entire world, throughout the entire history of the existence of government as a concept, of doing that to men who are viewed as having no prospects, whose main sense of their own existence is that they have little or no hope for their future, for a successful life, for marriage and family, for successful work and things like that, of authorities or of con artists. Both, basically, because a lot of authorities are con artists. Communicating to them one way or another. Fight our battle. Be brutal, be ruthless, be murderous, be called evil by your enemies. Risk your life. Risk your soul, and we will give you hope. Hope that you can't get on your own, because your circumstances make you a social outcast, or exclude you from the benefits of society. Even if you're not a social outcast in terms of people talking to you and having relationships, you still get excluded from the rest of the benefits of society. That is what it means fully to be an incel. Is to be in that group of people that every government ever, every warlord ever, every cult con artist leader that has started some terrorist organization ever has exploited. Men with no hope, no prospects, and no way out of the hole they're in. When you can be the person that extends a hand to those guys, you know, and they believe you, it makes it very easy to exploit and take advantage. And there aren't very many people trying to extend a hand to those guys to help them out of that hole without exploiting them, without taking advantage of them, without getting them into more trouble, instead of giving them the tools they need to have some hope on their own through positive means. So this guy was involved in that type of exploitation, and he was doing it in a way that ordinary people just, it wouldn't even occur to us, much less would, you know, find the tools and successfully navigate it without getting arrested and imprisoned for it. How did he do that if he's not part of the so-called deep state, the bureaucracy, the law enforcement and national security bureaucracy? Like, it's a very serious question.
And the same can be said for the next guy. What next guy, Mike? Well, I'm sure I don't know. I'm sure he's some kind of Iranian or someone in the, I believe it's 5 troops of assassins who have been set up to assassinate Donald Trump. And apparently 3 of them are foreign. And so you're some kind of xenophobe if you oppose any of those troops of assassins. And I don't know where we go from there, because apparently 2 of them are not, but they count. They count as foreign people as well, because they're all trying to take down Trump. And as long as you're trying to take down Trump, it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter if you're Iranian or if you're from fucking Pennsylvania or some shit. As long as you're trying to take down Trump, you're on our side. You're in the great nation of democracy, right?
Well, either way, like, the main point that I wanted to get across, I think I've gotten it across tonight, is you look at this situation, and it does point to, there's a lot of high strangeness here. It's the kind of high strangeness that you see if you get to digging into the wormhole of people who believe that they have had some sort of encounter with aliens or other dimensional beings or some such stuff like that, and been contacted afterwards by individuals affiliated with their national government. And, like, there's a lot of commonalities worldwide that predate a worldwide discussion about it, and there's a lot of other, there's questions that come up, right? And that's the situation here. There's questions that come up, and there's not really an innocent answer presenting itself to any of those questions.
And all of this can also be applied to people who think they know God. I mean, it's all...
Well, not really, because there's not a conspiracy theory that the United States government is visiting people who think that they believe that they know God and telling them to shut up about it. And you see what I mean? Like, this points to federal government exploitation of people with vulnerabilities. That, no, I keep saying people. By people, they don't do this to women. They do this to men. They do this to boys, right? Exploiting people with vulnerabilities of the mind and vulnerabilities in their matrix of social support, or lack of a matrix of social support, right? So you remember that the term matrix isn't just the movie The Matrix. We're talking about a matrix is like a net, basically, or a web. Like, your matrix of social support would be your friends, your family, support you get from your coworkers. If you have a community online that's dedicated to a particular thing, like you're really into crochet and you're in a bunch of crochet forums, that's your network, your matrix of social support. It has a whole bunch of different aspects and angles. But there are a lot of guys who have no such thing, or their entire matrix of social support is one type of forum. Very strict religious forums, or very strict political forums, or forums for discussing adversity that they are experiencing. Like, incel forums mainly exist to bond over and support each other through the depression that one experiences as a result of being excluded from the benefits of social connection. So, government exploiting that vulnerability, when you have somebody that's isolated, they don't even have to have a mental illness or a psychological or intellectual disability. They don't have any support defending themselves against propaganda, especially if they have no hope, right? So what I'm talking about here is the use of those conditions, and it's not outright. Like, we grew up with military commercials that showed how great it was, to be the rescuer and savior of people in war-torn areas as part of the military. Like, oh, look at these heroes. These heroes are great. Everybody's proud of them. We love them. You want to be one, don't you? But here we just have this guy, this individual guy, going and finding men to exploit in this manner, so that, the government can turn around and say, well, no, he wasn't with us. He's just crazy. This completely crazy, completely incompetent weirdo who just happened to be able to do a bunch of things that no other person would think of or know how to do if they did think of them. Who has access to no-look visas and can get them to people from one foreign country to get them into another foreign country with United States government assistance. Like, what?
There's no such thing as United States government assistance unless it pertains to Trump.
Yeah.
Anything bad that happens is because of Trump, and anything good that happens is because of Kamala. So it's not the government, because Kamala is not the government. She's trying to change everything that Joe Biden did. But Joe Biden was perfect. he was perfectly lucid in everything he did. Nevertheless, we need to change everything he did, and elementary Donald Trump.
Yep. And there's nothing wrong with anything Joe Biden did, and that's why all of it has to be undone. Right? Like, the whole thing, like, none of it makes sense. But this in particular, this isn't just a rabbit hole. It's more like a duck vagina. Female ducks, like duck mating rituals are humans look at it and interpret it as rape. Like, animals don't have the sense to understand bodily autonomy, so it's kind of weird to call it that. But female ducks evolved this sort of curly cute, pigs did too, this weird labyrinthine vagina to limit the ability of male ducks to pass on their DNA to only those who had the capacity to overcome the most difficulties.
So they can go, oh, no, I don't want this. Oh, please, no, I don't want this. Oh,
no means nothing to a duck.
Your corkscrew appears to align perfectly with my corkscrew, but still, oh, no, I don't want this. Oh, no. Oh, no, you're penetrating me perfectly. I don't want this. Oh, no. Oh.
But yeah, it's that level of weirdness, like, but the whole thing, it's not just a rabbit hole. It's a corkscrew duck vagina hole that we're going down here with this information, and at every angle, every point of it, you look at what it's made of, and it's made of ways the government exploits vulnerable men. Right? It's the whole thing. Every brick in the wall is ways the government exploits vulnerable men.
Amen.
So we're going to go a little bit farther with this, and then I'm going to stop it because it's 9:30 already.
Which is really where we start to get, I think, into the heart of the network here. But in the next slide there in the deck, if you just scroll over to the very next, you'll see it says this is the CBP report that they issued to Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, to investigate. It says, subject state, he did not get paid for his recruiting efforts. He lists his recruiting partners as soldiers from Afghanistan, Romania, Pakistan, Syria, and Israel. Now understand, Romania is the major transshipment point for weapons, and there's the UK even established a...
I just want to know how he knows soldiers from all of those countries that he can organize this with. When he's... like, his history doesn't have anything in it that would indicate why he should. But just saying. Again, it's weird.
Land bridge between Pakistan and Romania in order to make it easier for Pakistan, which is the big CIA weapons and terrorist shipping depot, and it has been since the 1970s when the Pakistani ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service, was essentially taken over by the Central Intelligence Agency when we were using Pakistan as the main staging point for our training and funding of the Mujahideen, which is the origins of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. This is why all these corrupt banking networks run out of Pakistan.
Mujahideen, that's basically holy warriors, I guess would be a good way to describe them. They're people whose reason for fighting their battle is centered around considering their religious branch the solution to the problems that they're fighting the battle to address.
They're just trying to protect women.
Yeah.
What on earth is anyone's problem with our approach to protecting women's?
Yeah.
I mean, insane.
But what I was talking about earlier, where I was talking about how that proxy war between the United States and Russia and Afghanistan, where we supported the Mujahideen, they became Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Like Al-Qaeda, if I remember correctly from when I was reading about this before and sort of tracing the pathways for how these different terrorist organizations were created, ISIS came out of the destruction, or the presumed destruction, of Al-Qaeda. So like this all connects right back to proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union, or the United States and Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, that's been going on since World War II. Like, it just never stopped. It's one of the reasons why occasionally I will say that you can't have World War III, because World War II directly resulted from World War I, And if you really want to get technical about it, we are still in World War I. It never ended. It just changed shape.
Well, it changed temperature. It was called Cold War. And
it changed temperature a little bit.
We like to think the Cold War ended in 91 when the Soviet Union dissolved, but it didn't. The KGB already did its damage. Listen to Yuri Bezmenov. You all know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. It changed color, it changed shape, it changed temperature, but it didn't end. Right? It just evolved. Every time it hit a point where the government faced the circumstance wherein the people expected it to end, it had to change just enough so that the people would have the illusion of a conclusion in peacetime. Like, that's basically, and then they've been exploiting men as cannon fodder, as peons, as patsies, as dirty work doers, and as disposable human beings that whole time, in a variety of ways, for a variety of purposes. But the ultimate purpose was for the people whose income is wrapped up in investment in materials to create war, and using war as a Rube Goldberg money laundering machine to continue to get richer and richer. That's all that's been going on, and this is just a step right here. It's just, we got a weird glimpse into it, and it provides me with the perfect opportunity to hammer home to you, we need to be more vigilant about this. And one of the things that I think that the men's rights movement needs to be doing is supporting men in becoming invulnerable to that exploitation. And not just men who already know to go their own way, not just men who already have stable homes and families and already know to stick with what they're doing and not get sucked into that, but men who have nothing, who are the most vulnerable, who have no hope, who can be sold a bill of goods because at least it's something. Those guys, the men's rights movement should be reaching out and supporting incels in developing the tools they need to be invulnerable to this. It's one of the reasons the government, by the way, is demonizing them as threats too. Because if they're demonized and they can be convinced that they have to prove their worth, that makes it even that much more easier to come in with a bulldozer or a backhoe of military propaganda and just scoop them up into service as cannon fodder. It's something that we should be doing because the only way to protect men as a population against being exploited in war is if we protect even the most vulnerable men. Even the men that they're the easiest to not care about.
Stand as well.
The apex fallacy.
Yeah.
It's what it comes down to. It's what people understand in every realm except when it comes to men. That there are some men who are in charge of everything. Therefore, we don't need to worry about all the men in charge of anything, not even their own families. I mean, not even long ago, most men had some charge over their own families. That was how it worked throughout most of history. But we're now living in an age where the vast majority of men don't have charge over their own families. But the overriding narrative is that all men are in charge of everything. Every man is Elon Musk or some shit. Every man is Donald Trump or anything. Every man has complete control over everything that the media says they're in control of, but they aren't. When you actually look deep into the non-apex fallacy of the relationships between the average man and the average woman, the average man is not in charge of the average woman. They have no recourse against any of the actions of the average woman. Which this another one of these strange inversions when where everyone thinks that every man is in charge of every woman. If anything, the opposite is true. But it's difficult to get that across to people because they're so entrenched in this narrative where it's called patriarchy, where no matter how poor a man is, he has power over every woman, no matter how rich she is. You know what I mean. Good. Sorry, play the thing.
Well, when the patriarchy fallacy gets used to excuse having no compassion for men who get roped into this shit too. So guys that grew up in poverty, that went through high school ignored by everybody in their class, that didn't get called on when their hand was raised by, you know, in the classroom because they were practically invisible, that, you know, if you asked them about school dances, they would just laugh. Yeah, those weren't for me. Nobody was going to dance with me. I didn't want to go stand in a corner all night and look at everybody. Right? Those guys, people treat them like it's their fault when the military comes along and says, we can increase your prospects. You can be all that you can be. Your potential, you're cut off from your potential, but we can show you how to meet your potential. And then sends them overseas to a war that doesn't really have anything to do with any of their interests, where they end up getting blown up and losing limbs, and no matter what tools they may have gained from their military experience, they're now worse off than they were before. Right? That's nobody seems to offer those guys any sympathy. Well, it's your fault. You were in a war that was illegitimate. Shame on you. But, you know, if the military activates for a war that the public supports, and soldiers refuse to serve after enlisting and getting the benefits of enlistment, they get punished for it, and people have no sympathy there either. And if a guy doesn't join the military and he doesn't learn those tools and he doesn't have anybody to help him, they don't have any sympathy for him there either. Right? Like, that needs to change. Guys need support from society, and there isn't any other area of society that's going to give it to them. It's not coming from tradcons. It's not coming from any religious group. It's not coming from the school system. It's not coming from the government. It's not coming from the Boy Scouts of America. It's not coming from the Girl Scouts of America. It's not coming from women. It has to be the men's rights movement.
This is a discussion you'll discover even when conversing with, dare I say, normies, or dare I say, the people in your family. At some point, you'll hear women have to bleed from their nether regions all the time. They have to deal with these biological problems that men don't have to do. What do men have to deal with? Men don't have to deal with these things like periods, and you can sort of say, well, you can sort of respond with, men have to deal with a lack of sympathy. Like, it sort of doesn't matter what problems men have. Nobody cares what they are. Like, women and men, for the most part, have the same problem. The problems with careers, families, money, health, for the most part, men and women have the same problems. But when men have those problems, nobody cares. As can be demonstrated by this thesis that men don't have problems and women do because they have periods and stuff, and you can sort of say, well, men and women have much of the same problems, but men don't get sympathy when they have them. But this is difficult to get across, so you have to match these issues of genitals and such, and so you go, okay, well, men have genitals on the outside of their body. A man can be paralyzed instantaneously by a single kick to the bollocks because men have sexual organs on the outside of their body. All right, is that comparable to women having periods? But that's all by the by, because the biggest problem men have is that whatever problems they have, no one gives a shit. Like I said, men and women have most of the same problems, but nobody cares when men have them. As can be demonstrated by when someone says, well, women have periods. What do men have? Well, never mind that men have genitals on the outside of their body that can leave them paralyzed even by a child kicking them in the bollocks. The biggest problem they have is that nobody cares when they have problems. And this is so difficult to get across to people.
Well, it's difficult to get across to women, at least. I think most men should understand.
Anyone who's only presented with the problems presented to them in the mainstream media that's constantly telling them that women have all the problems, and whenever you're thinking about a woman's problems, you have to completely ignore men's problems. But, because women have all these problems and men don't, and that's
it's completely ignored by people that when women complain about stuff like this, it's not just sympathy. People try to solve the problems. Like, there are drugs now that you can take that alleviate pretty much all of the problems that could be considered serious problems that can occur with that particular bodily function, right? But there's not anything done by modern medicine to deal with if you pick up a toddler and he just happens to kick you wrong, you're on the floor for 5 minutes, right? And there's also nothing being done in modern medicine to address the fact that there are some men who basically just get kicked out of society in terms of, during their childhood, in terms of people treating them as a part of their neighborhood, their community, their family, their organizations that they're involved in or anything. They just are invisible. There are probably about half the population, half of the male population is just, most of the time, they're invisible. And if they're not invisible, they're being condemned for something, or ordered to do something, or somebody's trying to take advantage of them in some way. They have a complete lack of compassion from society. They have a complete lack of consideration from society. So they get no empathy. They don't even get sympathy. They get none of it. And, yeah, women act like periods are a big deal. But the truth is, and this is a truth that I didn't learn to articulate it until after I started working with people with disabilities. Right? When it comes to physical conditions that you live with, that are just lifelong physical conditions, which that particular bodily function is a at least 2/3 of your life, lifelong physical condition as a female unless you have something unusual about your biology, right? Like a defect, or you've had to have surgery, or you've chosen to eliminate it, or something along those lines. It's there for everybody. Everybody has it. Everybody experiences it. It's there. And we're not even the only species that has this happen. Other species have this happen as well. Other mammals, right? You develop the capability of internally dismissing physical conditions like that. And it's not just periods. It's not just things that women experience. Like, if I think about it right now, if I deliberately pay attention into it right now, my neck hurts, my shoulders hurt, my hips hurt, my sciatic nerve hurts. It goes all the way down my right leg and into my foot. And it hurts all the time. It never stops. It hurts like at maybe... It ranges from, like, what you would say when people ask you, your pain scale, between 2 and 5 on the pain scale. Goes back and forth there. And it doesn't actually stay on my radar for more than a split second when the pain level changes. And it's so consistent that if a medication I take or a condition that I change in the moment alleviates the pain, gives me relief, I can feel cold where the nerve was going off. It doesn't just stop hurting. It feels cold, like somebody took heat away from that area, because it's a burning pain. But it never bothers me unless it gets above a 5 on my pain scale. And my pain scale's a little skewed, because I've had brain swelling, I've had broken bones, I've had 3rd-degree burns, so it's different for me. But everybody that I've worked with that has a physical disability that causes a mobility issue or causes chronic pain or, in any way, shape, or form affects their ability to do things normally, they just develop a tendency to... that's not on their radar. They just automatically accommodate for it. They automatically compensate for it. And it's not a complaint. So when I hear women complaining about their periods, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy. Like, unless they've got an unusual health condition that makes it unhealthy in a dangerous way to them, or unhealthy in a way that makes it like worse than the majority of women experience. They have some sort of mental health fallout from the changes that take place to your hormones and everything. I don't want to hear it. I think it's dumb. I don't want to talk about it. We don't spend all day talking about whether we're constipated or not. We don't, or the last time you had diarrhea, or how your poop smells, or what a pain it is to try to deal with, like, well, you get skid marks from eating this kind of food, or you can't find a toilet fast enough, or all nobody makes that their ordinary average conversation. And only women can get away with taking something that is commonplace as an experience, that is a lifelong normal experience, that it's just like other experiences that people learn to disregard aside from whatever accommodations and adaptations you need in order to make it not interfere with your everyday life, right? And just bitch about it all the time, to the degree that they bitch more about that than men bitch about the prison system, which they should be bitching about, because it's designed to enslave, it's designed to harvest a percentage of the male population and enslave them and exploit them.
Yeah, much like whenever I hear men complain about all the things that men have to complain about, I'm like, that didn't happen just now. I just imagined it happening for the sake of the argument I'm happening right now. It literally never happens.
They really shouldn't. Women really shouldn't be complaining about that. And men really should be complaining about a lot of things that most men just accept. Right? Don't get involved with the wrong woman, because if she lies about you, you're going to go to jail. And most men will. You can't win a fight with a girl, because if you hit her back, you're beating up on a girl. But if you don't hit her back, then you got beat up by a girl. Like, every guy tells his son that, right? Well, this is really important for you to know, and you have to pass that on to your son, because it's the truth, it's the facts. Like, there is no coming out of a physical confrontation with a woman and not being condemned for it one way or another, right? And men just accept that. And then women have a physical sign that we get to be the stewards of life. The beginning, the most vulnerable time of a human being's life. The shapers of that human being's physical welfare and future. And they bitch about it. That's kind of stupid. Sorry. In any case.
Everything's kind of stupid.
Yeah. We got more tangents than material at this point. But I think we're going to continue with this. I'm going to maybe go back a few seconds into it next week. Well, we are going to continue with this next week. We may end up having to do this for 3 weeks. We may not.
This is much better than talking about suffragettes. I thank you.
I will eventually get back to the. I am eventually going to get back to the suffragettes. I'm going to go through the material that we've been reading, though, and see if I can do some summarizing, because I think we've hit the point where what we were discussing, we got the point across in what we were trying to explain. And so I want to go on to the next stage with suffrage, but I don't need to preempt this with that. I think this is more important for people to understand, because this is like the electric boogaloo of the military-industrial complex. Right? For Gamergaters, understand what I'm saying, Gamergate supporters, this is the electric boogaloo of the military-industrial complex. This is the Five Guys burgers and fries of the military-industrial complex. We are getting a look at how the government manages to con hundreds of men into subjecting themselves to government exploitation while appearing to keep its hands clean.
Throughout all of history, men just wanted to play video games, but they were forced to die in wars.
Yep.
Just like that.
So we still have some super chats and chows here. We have a couple from Richard Bier in the Super Chow channel. He gave us $5 and said, "Have you ever seen that Jeff Dunham show where his peanut doll gets his own ventriloquist dummy of Jeff, and then the tiny Jeff dummy has his own tiny peanut puppet?" That's terrible. Here is one of those puppets, or Harris is one of those puppets, because controlled by another puppet, depending on just how he was in service to Ukraine, his American citizenship should have been forfeit if he had joined their military. There should have been a period after puppet, but there wasn't. So, like, I might not complain about my period, but I will definitely complain about a lack of a period. In any case, yeah, depending on, like, honestly, if you go to another country and join their military, there should be questions that your government asks you when you come back, at the very least, because that does call your loyalty into question, right? But unless, it's in conjunction with your own nation's activities there, but then you should just join your own military if you're going to support what your country is doing in another country. But yeah, Harris, I don't even know. Joe Biden, I think, is a genuinely unintelligent man.
Isn't it weird how everyone's forgotten all of the crimes of the Biden family?
Yeah.
Now that Kamala is in charge. Everyone's like, fuck Joe Biden. It doesn't matter anymore. Let's just focus all of our attention, all of our attention on Kamala Harris. And now everyone's just like, it doesn't matter that Joe Biden and his family have extracted billions of dollars from the American taxpayers. Fuck
Yep.
it.
Yeah. And honestly, like when you look at the Biden family and everything, you're looking at a decades-long history of corruption there. So all of this just kind of ties in together. Like I said before, the Ukrainian war isn't about any people. It's about money laundering. It's exploiting a lot of people. It's impacting a lot of people. But it's about money laundering. Richard Beer gave us...
We keep saying the big guy is Joe Biden, but I have to wonder if the big guy was Obama.
Maybe.
Eh?
I don't know. All the evidence pointed to it being Biden. But Richard Beer gave us $5 and said, men will get shamed by the public if the military finds them unfit for service due to physical conditions, as if they can either get over the conditions or do something about the conditions to serve anyway. And actually, you know, that's true. And you know what else is true? And men who cannot serve in peacetime because of those conditions can be drafted in wartime, often in spite of having one or more of those conditions. Eyesight is one of those conditions. Like, that almost happened to my dad during the Vietnam War. Like, you're not good enough, you can't shoot straight, we can't use you because you won't, your ability to fire a gun at people and hit them, as opposed to, like, hitting nothing, or your colleagues, like that's not good enough. You got to be able to do that. Oh no, you know what? We lost 50,000 men. We'll take you.
It's another reason that the 90s was so awesome. Like, even if you were fighting age in the 90s, there weren't any wars to fight because everything was so fucking awesome in the 90s. I mean, there was a Gulf.
If you were not from the United States, that's true.
Yeah,
like we were all over South America in the 90s. I say we. I'm here. I am. I'm female. I wasn't involved in any of that. But our country, our government sent men to all kinds of South American conflicts, created South American conflicts, and then sent men. And there are other things that are going to come up in this next week that are just ludicrous about it. But yeah, men who grew up in the United States during the 90s, one of my friends enlisted after we graduated, after the first Gulf War, and then was sent to Somalia.
That'll do it.
He came back with a whole different demeanor about him. Doesn't talk about any of his experiences there.
Yeah, compared with the 80s or the noughties, I mean, whichever way you slice it, the 90s was an awesome time to be alive.
This was in the 90s. Well, I graduated in 1991. If you were a little kid in the 90s, it was awesome.
Yeah,
but if you were military age in the 90s, it wasn't.
We're all here right now because we happen to be children and or teenagers in the 90s, and we grew up in this time where not a great deal went wrong. There, like I say, there was a Gulf War, and there's always something going on in the Middle East. But those of us who grew up as children or teenagers in the 90s, we were like, "This is awesome," even while we were listening to grunge. And like our music was all about how awful everything is. In reality, everything was fucking great compared to how awful everything was before that and after that. Honestly, I think this is why so many people on the cusp of Gen X and millennials sort of are looking for some fight to fight because we didn't have one in our prime of life.
Yeah,
For the
it's
mo-
very
for the most
different
part.
from like my age group of my generation, which I was born in 1972, so I was like right in the middle of Gen X, closer to the end than to the beginning, if I understand correctly. But we went from, the bomb's gonna drop any day now, and we're all gonna die anyway, so we might as well just live our lives, right? And popular music, including things like "I hope the Russians love their children too," about nuclear war, to the manipulation that took place around the war in Iraq. And it was quite interesting because a few years prior, maybe it was only a few months prior to the conflict even, Jay Leno had his wife on his late night show, The Late Show, to talk about the plight of women in Afghanistan under Al-Qaeda. Something I'd never seen a comedy host and a talk show host that was all about this movie's coming out and that kind of thing, fun, entertaining thing is going on. This was pretty serious subject matter for all that, right? And you learn about how prior to Al-Qaeda's takeover, women in Afghanistan lived fairly close to how women in America live in terms of, their prospects in life, their education, their decisions about getting married, their ability to get medical care, and what have you, right? And then all of a sudden there's Al-Qaeda and these strict religious beliefs, and now if a woman has to go to a doctor, she can only go to a female doctor, but women are not allowed to go to or not allowed to be doctors. So if a woman has cancer or she has a childbirth issue, she might die. And that's just it. Girls can't go to school and blah blah blah. But she didn't talk about the plight of any of the men under that regime, where if your profession was musician, you got dragged out into the street and murdered by the God police. And if you didn't join the military, you got treated like you were suspect. If you did anything wrong, you might get publicly flogged. If you looked at a woman cross-eyed, you got accused of attempted rape. And if you were convicted of rape, you got the death penalty. Immediately. But she did talk about women's plight, and it was because it's an emotional appeal. Get the American people on board with the American government interfering with the national politics of Afghanistan, which they were already doing. And then later, we get the story about the invasion of Kuwait and all of the emotional appeals that were part of that story, like claiming that the invaders had thrown babies out of incubators, in the hospital, and taken the incubators and left the babies behind and all that, which turned out to not be true. And the claim that there were nukes that also turned out to not be true.
And yet, now it's in the 2020s. The Zoomers are starting to think, wait, native men are being treated like disposable weapons. Mm-hmm. This is some strange new occurrence in our society.
Yeah,
and we're starting going, no. I know everything seemed great in the 90s because we were all listening to heavy metal and eating pizza, but no, this was a thing even in the 90s.
Yep.
We were just blind to it because we were having such a good time. But in the meantime, fighting age men were being sent off to pointless wars, even in the 90s.
And they were conned, right? They were conned
Yeah.
with, be a hero to these poor, downtrodden, abused, exploited, terrorized people. Go save these babies. Go save these women. That's why they were dragged into that. Right? And then they came back and people there was a fight over whether or not people should spit on them like they did the Vietnam veterans. And even children who grew up in households with Vietnam veterans fought over that. Right? And we saw conflict after conflict where we would get little bits and pieces from the news media. This is going on, that's going on. Every single one of those little bits and pieces represented the United States government sending men to other countries to interfere in their political goings-on and interfere with their government, interfere with their public, get men dragged into war, get men dragged into military conflicts, and get men killed. Every single news story about our involvement in another country south of the border. What we're seeing now with this invasion that we're having with just tons and tons of migrants crossing the border undocumented and being shipped all over the country by Democrats to small towns to double their population, where now half the population are people that don't even speak English and don't understand the local culture or the laws or anything. Like, all of that is fallout from 50 years of American interference in foreign nations' civil conflicts south of the border.
Yeah, and people are now going, oh, look, white men are suddenly being treated like second-class citizens. Native men are being treated like second-class citizens. Men of all kinds are being treated like second-class citizens. This is new. No, it was never new. It's always been happening.
Yeah.
It's just that the slightly higher class society of people didn't have to deal with this, and those were the people in charge of the media. They portrayed their complete lack of issues into the media, so we didn't know. It's much like in the 60s. People often think, oh man, it would be great to live in the 60s because of the flower power and the revolution and shit. That only happened for a small percentage of people. It was mainly rich people who could afford to go to Woodstock and roll around in the fucking mud for a year. Most people in the 60s weren't hippies. They were living paycheck to paycheck. It was awful, just like it was in most of history. History of the 60s has been portrayed the way the rich elite would like to portray it. Yeah, we were all fighting against the system, man. We were taking acid and sitting in fields and shit. No, yeah, you were. But most people were living in terraced houses, wondering where the fuck their next meal is going to come. And that's I guess hopefully that's what people will realize about the 90s. I know I was saying just now how the 90s was awesome, and yeah, I guess it was better than the 60s, obviously, but for the most part, the people who experienced it best were the people who could afford to experience it best. And
it's that way, and during every time period, people get nostalgic for. Some people, there's some time periods where more people are nostalgic because more people fit into the economic spectrum, the part of the economic spectrum that had it good. Like some points in time, the line between everything sucks and enough things are okay to get nostalgic about this time period was farther down on the economic levels than others, but there's always points in time where a lot of people were poor and had a rough time. The big difference is that there are points in history where if you lived in poverty, you had opportunities available to you to improve your situation at least a little bit. Where there are other points in history where, like, because of the economy, because of the laws, because of the circumstances, improving your situation is damn near impossible. But in any case, like I said, we really do need to end the show so I can set up the after show and we can actually have it. It is 10 o'clock here, 10:14 p.m., and I usually don't go this long. And you can hear I'm having some, like, I know the listeners heard me cough. I managed to mute Discord first, but I didn't mute until after the first cough in the show, in the stream. So sorry about that, guys. But it's just part of living in my body.
You call that coughing? I'll show you coughing.
Oh, you guys yeah, you guys didn't hear that part. I sometimes sound like I'm vomiting when I cough. So, in any case,
considering how many things Hannah is allergic to, she restricts herself quite amazingly.
I'm taking extra allergy medicine lately because of the season. So there is that. But I am allergic to the accountability gap and male disposability and all that stuff too, and we're talking about it tonight, so there you go.
We love you, Hannah. we love your resilience to all of the things to which you have to be resilient.
Well, it's like I said before, though. I knew I was going to do the show tonight, and I took out extra allergy medicine. You develop coping mechanisms for this kind of thing. So where, like I said, women play victim of their periods. I don't consider myself a victim of this. I just consider this thing a thing that I deal with in my life, just like some guys have constant back pain that they have to deal with. And, some guys know that when they go places, they're going to get treated like a creep, and they just treat it like something they have to deal with. Well, I don't have any reason to whine about my allergies, because there's a whole area of medicine dedicated specifically to alleviating the suffering of people with my medical condition. But guys have every right to complain if they get wrongly treated as a creep just for being places, well, ugly or conventionally unattractive or not conventionally attractive or not wealthy, not well dressed enough, not known to the neighborhood, so on. And that's the difference. Guys have every right to complain, and they don't. Women complain when they have no excuse. And it's one of the things that makes men vulnerable to everything that we've been talking about tonight. So, but with that, let's see, what else did I have here? I had another super chat. Oh, I didn't finish the super chat.
Perhaps in the after show, I'll complain about exactly why I'm not in Canada.
Yeah.
That's not my fault. Well, it is, but it's not. Whatever.
So after the part that I commented on men getting shamed, let's see, possibly even more so in these days, as the military is offering personnel paid for medical treatment that will render the service member undeployable permanently. So you join the military, and you get paid for medical treatment, medical alteration, as I know what he's talking about there, and now you can't be deployed because there are medical upkeep services that you need to have consistent access to. How's that good for the military? Right. And I think that I'd already finished all the super chats. We read the... Okay, no, that I didn't read this one. I'm going to look and see if there's any before it that I also didn't read. But I don't think there are. Yeah, I read the one about the puns. The next one that shows up here, got to scroll all the way back down to it now, is Catherine Scully gave us $5 Canadian and said, I recently learned about a General Smedley Butler. He did a speech in the 30s called War is a Racket. Last I looked, Actually, there's an archive of that speech. I'll have to find it because that's actually it's an interesting thing. But yeah, General Smedley Butler, War is a Racket. And I think that is the last super chat. We did not get any Rumble rants, any paid Rumble rants. Yeah, Neat Scholar, though, gave an example of men being stopped for being men. He said, I walked on the street because I had to drop the car for maintenance. The cops pulled me over, and you can be pulled over as a pedestrian. The cops will be driving along, they'll pull over, they will confront you and ask to see your identification and question you about why you are where you are and so on. This is a phenomenon that happens, and there's law backing it up. Because I might be a PDF file hanging too close to the grade school on the street corner. Like, you can be walking past, and you can clearly be on your way somewhere and get treated that way and have no recourse. He says, can't even walk on a fucking street as a man without incidentally terrorizing people. You know why? It's because people are programmed to view men as predators.
It's because you don't have a female chaperone. People often complain about how in the Middle East, women can't walk down the street without a male chaperone. Well, guess what the fuck what?
Yeah. Well, and the big difference, actually, that makes it far worse, talking about that experience with regard to men, is when women aren't allowed to walk down the street without a chaperone, it is created as a law or a policy based on the implication that if they don't have a chaperone to protect them from other men will hurt them, right? But when a man walks down the street without a female chaperone and he gets stopped for it and confronted over it...
Because he's going to hurt someone.
Right. It's because of the implication that he is a threat. So women are being protected based on the implication that they are at risk because other men are a threat. But men are restricted based on the implication that they are a threat. Even though women more readily admit to engaging in interpersonal violence and sexual violence. And I guess women more readily admit to it because people don't treat it as a serious issue when they do. So that's all of our interesting chats, our super chows, our Rumble rants, everything. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to my co-hosts for participating. This is a particularly long sausage, and it's kind of a bitter one, but this is an issue to me.
Oh shit! It's been 3 hours. It doesn't feel like it's been 3 hours.
I don't have to go into work tonight, so I didn't cut it off because a lot of the things we were talking about were interesting and important. But this particular subject, I think, is fundamental to everything else that we talk about. I talk about the accountability gap being fundamental, but the compassion gap is equally fundamental. We have to close that too. If we can't protect men from being exploited, excluded, disadvantaged, discriminated against, abused, none of that stuff. You have to close the empathy gap, right? The compassion gap. The love gap. Gotta be done. And if women aren't gonna love men, then men should care as much as possible about each other. It's the only way to solve this problem. And when I'm talking about love, I'm talking about love for your fellow human being, obviously, not romantic love. Like, romantic love is kind of a trap, actually. Not for women, but it is for men.
The Greeks called it storge, or storge. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Yeah, it's hard to know because it's one of those languages nobody speaks ancient Greek. It's not, like people can read and write ancient Greek, but we don't know for a fact how everything in it was pronounced. But that particular word is correct. Yeah, the love for your fellow human being is vital.
Just affection. I think it's translated as affection. The same affection that you would have for women, you would have for men. Like, why wouldn't you?
Goodwill toward men. Right? We always remember peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and everybody thinks about peace on earth. But you can't have peace on earth if you don't have goodwill toward men. You can't have anything if you don't have goodwill toward men. I think I've hammered home over and over again that love is a combination of camaraderie, affection, and most importantly, investment, emotional, psychological, whatever, investment in the welfare of the person who you love. So if you love your fellow human being, you're invested in their welfare. You don't want them to be vulnerable to this type of exploitation. You don't want them to fuck up their lives. You don't want them to be the person everybody looks at and says, "You fucked up my life." You want them to be the person that gets to experience the happiness of being told, "Thank you, you helped me. You're fun to be around. I'm glad I met you." Like, that's loving somebody means wanting that as much for them as for yourself. And when men can form that bond as a gender, you'll have one up on women. Women have in-group bias, but women hate each other, do everything they can to undermine each other. They'll have a bias toward womanhood, female society, women's issues, women's rights, but when you put women in a room together, on a team together, in a community together, and make them rely on each other, you get relational aggression. Men are better at teamwork. Use it. But with that, love you guys. We'll see
Amen.
And we'll see you next Thursday. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.